I'm Mary Pierce, and I would like to welcome you to the October meeting of the Historic Zoning Commission. And our charge is to save historic resources, protect them, and manage change over time in compliance with our historic zoning guidelines. And I'm a little rusty. I'm chairing the meeting tonight because Chairman Jim Roberts is on a pre-planned trip, and I'm the vice chair, so bear with me a bit. Notice has been given of this meeting, and we accommodate people who cannot attend the meeting to participate in the following ways: to watch the meeting on Franklin TV or the City of Franklin website, watch the live stream through the City of Franklin Facebook and YouTube accounts. Comments can be emailed to the planning intake at franklintn.gov to provide the full commission and include in the minutes, but they are not read aloud if you do send a comment via the internet. So we will get started. We have, besides Jim Roberts, we have one other absence, but we do have a quorum. So it's fall break and we will get going. There is an announcement by our staff person, Amanda Rose.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. I did want to note, based on what you just said, that we did receive a couple of emailed comments that I have shared with the commission in full. I do have hard copies of those if you'd prefer to have those in hard copy, but they will be filed with the minutes.
Okay.
We also wanted to note that we have a new assistant preservation planner on staff here in our planning department. This is Emily Huffer. She is joining us as of last week, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey, y'all. Is it good? Okay. Hey, y'all. I'm Emily Huffer, as Amanda just said. I'm originally from Deckard, Tennessee, so I'm just so excited to be here. And let's see. I'm in the process of getting my master's at MTSU, and I'm getting my degree in historic preservation, and fingers crossed I'll graduate in the spring. Just have to finish up my thesis. So,
Welcome. And can we ask what your thesis is in?
I'm writing about a Rosenwald school in Winchester, Tennessee, and so I'm writing about the school and the community. And I actually had the opportunity to work with the community members to build a museum within the walls of that school.
Okay. Thank you.
I did tell Emily that sounds very familiar to one of our items tonight, so she may
Yes.
be keenly interested in that and maybe
Yep.
want to share some of her expert, experience with you guys on how to make that work. So we're very
you.
excited to have Emily.
Welcome.
I also
will-
wanted to mention that we have a design review committee meeting
Yeah.
scheduled for Monday, the 17th, a week from today at 4 o'clock here in this room. So I will send that agenda out once it's ready. One quick announcement I know I didn't put on the sheet. I forgot to do that. We are going to be working to get the Historic Zoning Commission into the program online that our Board of Mayor and Aldermen and Planning Commission are in, which is called Civic Clerk. So if you ever go to the city website and you access one of the agendas for one of those commissions, you'll see it's in a repository online sort of format that's really easy and really accessible to the public. We're doing that with historic zoning, so we'll be reaching out to all of you to train you on how to use that, and I promise it will be a lot easier and a lot easier to make sure that it's passed out to everyone that wants to access it as quickly as possible. So be on the lookout for that.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to vote to place the non-agenda items on the agenda. The non-agenda process by design is reserved for emergency instances. Non-agenda items shall be considered only upon the unanimous approval of all the historic zoning commissioners. So is there anyone here this evening that has any type of emergency item?
I wasn't made aware of any either.
Thank you.
Do you mind if we to cover the minutes really quick as well?
Oh, it wasn't on here. Yes, we can. Is there anyone that would like to make a motion to approve the minutes of the September? Okay, is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. Is there anyone that wishes to make a citizen comment on something not on the agenda? Doesn't seem to be anyone. The first item is consideration of alterations at have to put on my glasses, at 903 West Main Street. Jenny Harbar, applicant, Bayer. I think I've ruined, and that has been postponed. Is that correct?
Miss Pierce, do you mind starting at the top of page 2 with the public comment protocol?
I asked for the public comment.
I can cover that. Just
Okay.
okay. So really quickly, and all bear with us. This is our vice chair, and
Yeah.
she's stepping in graciously to cover this. The public comment protocols. If a citizen has provided an email comment that has been received by the commission, and it will be added to the record. If you would like to make a comment in person on one of tonight's items, please be sure to complete a comment card. Those comment cards are on that small table right there by the pillar at the door. Be sure to include your full name and the number of the item to which you'd like to speak. We do need those before that item comes up. So if you do plan to speak for or against any item on the agenda, please fill one of those out and get that to me just as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. I did miss that. And item 1 now is.
We'll cover the consent agenda too.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to cover that as well.
Do you want to cover that?
Absolutely. So the
Okay.
consent agenda is a list of items on the agenda that the staff has found to be fairly routine in nature and approvable based on any comments that have been provided to the applicant and to the commission ahead of time. Those items are not deemed to be controversial in any way. It is recommended by staff that items 1, 2, and 3 be approved on the consent agenda. If you so choose to approve the consent agenda, that means those items will be approved with the staff comments that have been provided to you and the applicants, and those applicants are free to go. And I can follow up with them tomorrow. If you'd like to discuss any of the items on the consent agenda, you are welcome to make a motion to pull one of those items from the consent agenda, with the others being approved, or however you choose to do that. There's just know that's 1, 2, and 3, which would include item number 1, Harbauer, item number 2, McCreary, and item number 3, Rittveld. So I'll offer Ms. Pierce asked for a motion.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve or deny or pull something from the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda, including items 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you. Is there a second? I'll second. Okay. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. I think that was unanimous. So we are now moving to item 4. Is that correct, Ms. Rose?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So would the applicant want to come forward and just, we'll let Ms. Rose make her comments, and then we'll let you make your comments, Mr. Butler.
Thank you all. I am pulling up the item on the screen. Okay. The application is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the replacement of material. Nope, that's item number 1. Item number 4, a request for the construction of a 7-foot-tall brick privacy wall along the left side of the property at 805 West Main Street. If you look to the screen here, you can see that 805 West Main Street is the property adjacent to the Arlington, to its right if you're viewing it from the street view. The request is being presented by the owner of the neighboring property, 725 West Main Street, representing the Arlington. The intent of the wall, according to the application, is to provide security for the Arlington and to provide screening for the residents of the subject property. The applicant is proposing that the majority of the wall be constructed on the subject property, as a sewer easement prevents it from being constructed at the Arlington site. The guidelines recommend that one, design fences and walls to be compatible with the architectural style of the building and to support the historic character of the district. The proposal is to construct a brick wall, and I'm going to zoom in as closely as I can here. You can see it designed here. Based on the chosen material, one should use proportions, heights, elements, and levels of opacity similar to those seen in the district. Privacy fences and walls can measure up to 7 feet in height and may be supported in rear yards, which are defined as being located no closer than 20 feet from the plane of the building's front facade. Because of the principal building's unique Y shape in orientation, the proposed privacy wall is located 25 feet from its front corner. This is consistent with the recommendations of the guidelines. It does appear that the style of the wall, however, is designed to match the character of the Arlington, which you see in the background of this image on the screen. And this is not technically the property onto which the wall is proposed to be constructed. The design of the privacy screening should relate to the style of the circa 1830 Y-shaped historic residence onto which the wall is proposed to be constructed. This may be achieved by utilizing a brick that matches that seen on that historic residence, or by installing, in lieu of a brick wall, a privacy-style wooden fence with vertical boards. It should be noted that all structures, including walls and columns, should be located outside of the sanitary sewer easement. I did want to show that, unfortunately, as proposed here, it looks like there is a request to connect the wall back to the Arlington with a gate and some sort of fencing or wall, and that is not something that the city can support because it would be crossing over a sanitary sewer easement. So the request for the wall is on the Ligon property, the adjacent property, and then there is a portion on the subject property, but that cannot be supported. It is recommended that the commission approve the wall construction on the subject property with the conditions that the wall either have brick that matches the circa 1830 residence on the site, or that in lieu of a wall, that the applicant choose to utilize a vertical board wooden privacy fence, as that style would be appropriate to that historic building onto which the wall is proposed to be constructed site. No construction associated with the Arlington site itself is approved as part of the COA if the commission chooses to approve the project, and the application must meet all the requirements of the city prior to work commencing. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll introduce yourself and your address.
Bernie Butler, and the address of which address?
I guess your business or home address.
2300 Foxhaven Drive, Franklin.
Okay.
And thank you, guys. We are, from the start, we have proposed a brick wall down the property line of Arlington. There was a sewer that went under the old apartments. That was a city sewer line that literally the apartments were built over, that we moved to the side of the property. And it turns out that because of that sewer easement, we're having to move the wall onto the Ligon property with an easement. And so that's what we're proposing to do. There is some talk, Amanda, by the way, that Ben has suggested that we can share the property line with the wall because we're so far away from the sewer. So anyway, how it gets built, the city will try to figure out how all that works. But the intent anyway is to build a 7-foot wall, much like the one across from Mike Hathaway's office over on 906. I think I gave you some pictures of that.
I don't have those in the file here now.
Well, it's a very narrow, very unfancy, nondescript wall that really won't be seen from the street. but it will be a good privacy wall for the Liggins and a privacy wall for the Arlington. So, be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve for discussion to get it started? Or disapprove?
Let's, Ms. Pierce, let's start with a motion to approve
Okay,
the wall construction with the conditions listed. And then we can hopefully discuss some more.
that'd be good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to ask Ms. Rose, the applicable guideline is Chapter 7, correct?
Yes, fences and walls.
And the height, the limit of the height recommended is 3 feet, but is that for the front of a property only?
Yes,
that we're
that's a great
talking about?
question, because we're looking at two properties in a sense. It can be a little confusing. So the property onto which the wall is proposed to be situated is the Ligon property, shown on the bottom of the screen here. And the wall can measure at privacy height up to 7 feet. Anything above 3 is considered privacy height, as long as it's recessed at least 20 feet from the front wall of the facade. This is a very unique shaped building, so the interpretation of where that facade starts can differ. The applicant measured it from the front corner. It may be that the commission finds it's more appropriate from the very front wall, the front wall behind the porch. But from the front corner of the house back, the applicant indicates that it's 25 feet back. From the Arlington, which is not the property onto which the wall is proposed, I believe it was about 17 feet back.
I have a question. Ms. Rose, who was the owner affidavit from?
The owner affidavit came from the subject property, so the owner of the property onto which the wall is being
So it's
installed.
from the Ligon family?
Yes, yes, sir.
Very good.
So the pedestrian gate that's shown, I mean, graphically, it's showing as if there's some piers, which I could understand why those kind of more permanent structures can't be in the easement, but you can't have any fence in Franklin in an easement?
There actually is a fence, Amanda. It's not the fence that's the problem for the easement.
Yeah.
It was the piers for the columns that hold the gate. And he's basically said we can do
A
wood-
fence,
wood
yeah.
structure, post with the gate. I just can't do the brick columns, which I was
Right.
trying to do to match
Okay, okay.
the brick wall. So,
And that is correct. That's the guidance I received from one of our city engineers. I did not receive any sort of elevation that indicates what that section will look like, so it is recommended that not be included as part of this application. But it could not be a privacy height at this location because it's not 20 feet back from the front wall of that property.
Right.
So the applicant, if they wanted to, it could have, that portion, if this portion's approved by the commission this evening, that portion could be approved administratively if the location's 20 feet back from that front wall.
And so condition number 2 removes that entire discussion.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Is there any visual to show what the fence will look like?
The only visual that was provided is, I'm going back to that screen. Bear with me, I'm having to zoom in a little bit on this. I think it's down here. Yes, right here.
Okay. And even though it's on the neighboring property, the responsibility of maintenance would be the Arlington?
And that's a civic issue, or a civil issue, independent of the city. The discussion today is that the guidelines recommend that fences and walls match the architectural style of the property onto which they're being situated.
Are there?
I have
any-
no problems with it. I think it's reasonable. I anticipate that you might be back and be asking to shorten it or something to get your gate to work, so,
Mhm.
I mean, I don't have a problem with approving this as is, but curious what everybody else thinks.
Well, I see here that the recommendation is for the applicant to consider vertical board and a wood privacy fence. Could you tell us what your response is to that?
Well, we're building a building that'll be there for hundreds of years. A wood privacy fence is not. And so I've obviously built hundreds and hundreds of feet of privacy walls in downtown Franklin, the historic district, that look beautiful. And so the intent is to build a really nice, very normal privacy wall that will be there forever, that has very little maintenance for anybody. I can tell you the property owner, the Liggins, don't want a wood fence or a fence, you know. They would love to have the brick wall.
And along with that question would be my next question, which is, again, context in the neighborhood. Is there something you can point to that emulates that same feature so that the context would be consistent?
Well, there's brick walls and houses and all over Hinchyville and all around this building, and, you know, so
Yeah.
it's a literally a line of the property that nobody's gonna see the wall except the Liggins and the people in the Arlington. It's not gonna be
Yeah.
seen. There's gonna be landscaping on both sides and in front of it.
And from start to finish, we're talking about how many feet?
220 feet long from where I think it's about 216 feet or something like that. But it's an incredibly expensive ordeal to build the wall, but it's a good permanent solution for both property owners.
Yeah.
So I would recommend, as you consider the staff's condition, staff is recommending that if supported, it be a brick wall that has brick texture, color, quality that matches that of the historic house on the property. If you feel differently, please note the context so that it is clear for the record. I believe the applicant's intent is to use a color that matches that of the Arlington building.
Do you have any objection to having it match the Liggin home?
What I would object to is just approving something that matched the Liggin house. I would say that we, you know, the intent was to pick a brick that was, you know, not that, but
I'd suggest that maybe instead of saying match, change to blend,
there you go.
and that staff would have the right to approve it.
I think that probably, yeah, I agree with the blend word, but I think you have to approve it anyways.
I do too.
Is
Yes,
that true?
I think that's a fair statement. It is an 1830 house. I don't think that it's possible to match it exactly. That was never, you know, staff's intent. I think blend is a much better word to address the intent of staff's comment.
I think if someone would want to offer that as an amendment,
I have another quick question to ask,
mhm.
Madam Chair. One of the elevations indicates the new brick wall and then aluminum fence. Is the aluminum fence new as well?
Aluminum fence will wrap around the back of the property and will be on our property, on the property line. So not on the Liggin property.
Interesting, okay. But that is new as well?
That's a security fence, yeah, around the back of the property.
Okay.
Staff can entertain that administratively if that's something you would prefer.
My understanding is that this couldn't be administratively done because it was on the Liggin property, which wasn't our property.
Yes, but I understand from what you just said that the aluminum fence is on
Our property.
Yes, and I
Alright.
can do that administratively.
Okay.
There's not enough here for staff to have reviewed that. There's no intimation of the height or the total perimeter, so that would need to be handled separately. But could
just-
be administrative.
I just mention it because the two are
Yeah.
connected. And then as far as the brick goes, it is a solid brick. It's not like
No.
here a brick, there a brick.
No, literally, if you go out to 906 Architects over here on the corner by First Methodist Church, there's a wall at a little residential
Okay.
building there between the Wealth Management Office and the actual residence there is called Arlington.
It is. I
Which
noticed
is,
that the other
you know,
day.
like, but anyway, there's a wall right between those two structures that is just a perfect, kind of don't notice it, elegant wall.
I am pulling that up now if you'd like to see it.
Yeah.
In just a moment.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Street view of that, and then also of the Arlington, your Arlington, please, when you have a chance.
Okay, Bernie, you may need to tell me where to go from here.
Oh, you can't pull pictures up. You need to go back towards First Methodist.
Okay, like on
Yeah, and you s-
Church?
No, the other way.
Okay.
There's that building right in front of us. Not First Methodist, go to the left. Go the other,
Other direction.
Courtney House.
Yeah.
Oh, the Courtney House. See, I didn't recognize that as the Arlington. Okay.
Well, it's just what they call the people that are in. There's that wall. And it's actually on this side and the other side of that property, and it's just a brick wall. So at the Brownstones and other places, I've done kind of more fancy versions of a privacy wall, but this is just kind of a very plain Jane privacy wall.
So it will be simple in nature, like what we're saying.
Very, exactly like this.
Okay.
It's going to use 6-inch block in between two forms of brick, one on each side. No limestone. I kind of don't want to call attention to it.
This is the subject property, the 825 West Main Street. And here is, this is from last year. Unfortunately, it's not up to date, but this is the Arlington.
So did you just pull that up just to remind me that how long this has taken?
I sure did. But no, I was asked by Ms. Marquardt to show
Yeah, thank
the
you.
Lincoln House here.
And could you put your cursor just more or less where we're talking about the placement of the,
I believe it's along this hedge line.
okay.
Yeah, there's a row of hedges, and then the wall starts, and then it goes back towards the parking garage, and behind Hank Brockman's building back there that is now owned by the grandson of Lawrence Welk. And a 1 and a 2.
Yeah.
So with that image, and you see the man who's standing where it's graded,
Yes.
will the actual grade from the Ligon property come over to the Arlington, or is that going to stay like that?
No, the property comes, the grade actually comes up to the level of the 2 entries on the side of the Arlington building. There's a sidewalk that goes down all the way down this side.
So that's been filled in, that's what you're saying?
Well, not yet, but a lot of that has been filled in, but it will be filled in before this wall is built.
Okay.
So the grade will, you know, and it obviously still slopes down some, but it's not like that.
That's a great question. So the exposure of the foundation that you see on this building in construction won't be fully exposed once the wall is ready to be built if approved. It won't match this grade, but it won't be too far off that grade.
Can I ask staff one more question about condition number 1? If the brick used for the wall construction must be selected to match the architectural character of the principal building, which would be the Legion House, right?
I'm sorry, it would be the
That.
historic house,
Right.
yes.
How is that What are we saying there?
So that was part of the reason, I believe, a couple of the commissioners had brought up blending. The color of the neighboring property, it's more consistent from brick to brick than the historic brick color. So it was the intent that it would be, because, it is sitting,
Right.
in my opinion, much closer to the historic house than it is to the infill house, that it be a color that is pulling from the brick color of the historic building as opposed to the more matte, consistent color
Okay.
of the Arlington. This is a situation where I know it might be considered a technicality, but if you look at it from this view, you can really see that the wall will feel like it belongs much more, in my opinion, to the historic property than to the neighboring property that's serving.
Then my question to you is the intent of the new wall to be the same brick as the Arlington?
Well, the intent was for it to be the brick of the Arlington, since we're paying the money for it, but the truth is, the only brick on the 1830s house is the wing walls in the front part of the original house, not the part that was added on the back, which is wood. And so, which you can see in those pictures, that is the tan back there. So the wall is actually being built back by the tan wood building, not up by the brick part of the house. So what color the brick is not,
To staff's point, it's a new element, it's a big element, and who does it belong to, and how does it relate to both structures? And that's why I asked, how are we qualifying? Is it just color, or is it just a type of brick? What's the face of it? Is it smooth, distressed? I don't know what the Arlington's gonna look like, so.
what the Arlington brick looks like.
It's on.
Huh?
It's on the
Okay.
building.
From my perspective, I wouldn't support it if it matched the Arlington brick. I think the wall is gonna be on this. It's not just gonna appear like it's on the historic property. It is on the historic property. There may be an easement, but it is on the historic property. And I know, I heard the comments about landscaping, which I appreciate, and I understand the reality of it, but we're not allowed to consider landscaping in camouflaging features, whether it's existing or proposed. So I mean, for me to support that, I think it needs to be blending, consistent, whatever our turn of phrase is, but to be consistent with the
Would
historic
you
home.
want to offer that as an amendment?
Sure. So I would move to amend the motion to provide that the wall be a brick structure that is consistent with and blending with the historic home.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the amendment? Do you want to make another
Well,
comment?
just one other, could you ask that in that amendment, that it come back to staff?
I think that is a condition of the approval, but
But
just
I'll
to
be
be
glad
sure.
to make that part
Yep,
of my
mhm,
motion,
yes.
subject to staff approval.
Okay. So, we've got amendment, and does anyone want to second the amendment? You seconded it, that's right, Susan. Okay, so you're, okay, do you have any other comments now?
I do not.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So if there being no further discussion, we'll vote on the main motion as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your help. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Bernie, appreciate it.
Okay. I will try to find the next item, which is, we're at
Yes, ma'am.
402.
430, item number 5.
Yep, item number 5. Okay, let me get. consideration of demolition and new construction at 436 Boyd Mill Avenue. Matt Smith, applicant. Amanda, if you want to give your comments.
Thank you. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of a non-historic carport and for the construction of a 1.5-story, 2-bay accessory structure. The applicant did appear before the Design Review Committee to discuss this proposal at its August 15th meeting. So in light of the Historic District Design Guidelines, the application relates to chapters 5 and 10, which are new accessory structures, and demolition and relocation. The demolition of the carport, and I'll go ahead and show that on the screen, is supported by staff as the guidelines recommend against the demolition of historic and structures with historic and architectural integrity. The proposed carport to be demolished was built circa 2000. It is not a historic structure and does not have architectural integrity as a result of that, so its removal is appropriate. The proposal now is to replace, generally within that same area, the carport with a accessory structure to serve as a garage and some additional space. You can see on the site plan here, this is the existing house. Boyd Mill Avenue is located to the far right, and this is the area where the proposed carport is to be demolished. Now on this site plan, you can see the proposed garage addition. It's about 31 feet back from the main portion of the house. There was a small addition approved by the commission recently that's been constructed, but you can see on the screen here the location of the proposed garage in relation to the house. I do want to add that this location is approximately 94 feet back from the front wall of the principal building. It's oriented with its garage doors facing the street. That is supported by the guidelines. As for its scale, it's not entirely, in staff's opinion, visually subordinate in scale, as the proposal is for a 1.5-story structure, and the house itself is a 1.5-story structure. You can see on the diagram here that the scale is similar. The guidelines do allow for the construction of a 1.5-story garage so long as it's visually subordinate in other ways as well. The proposal includes a height change or a difference of 3 feet 6 inches. You can see that documented on the screen here. I did ask the applicant to provide the benchmarks at which the height was measured. So I did provide that as an exhibit for you in your staff report. The height is measured at the front corner of the principal structure. I believe, Matt, if you look at the screen, it's somewhere in this area, correct?
Correct. It's at the front corner of that sunroom element there.
Yep. And that's the location at which the height was measured for the house at 25 feet 6 inches. The location at which the proposed garage height is measured is at the front wall, front left corner, right corner.
Yes, the corner that your little hand is on.
So that is the benchmark location for this, and that is important so that we make sure, because there are some grade changes here, that we're consistent in our methodology of approval and then ultimately in building permitting and construction. The footprint measures 1,234 square feet, which is in keeping with the recommendations of the guidelines generally and is in keeping with the regulations of the Franklin zoning ordinance as far as the ultimate footprint being no more than 50% of the footprint of the principal structure it serves. The details and ornamentation, the details complement but are less elaborate than the character of the historic building, so that can be supported. The roof form does relate to the pitch and shape of the principal building. The proposed materials include a cementitious lap siding of a reveal to match the addition to the principal building. So you can see at the rear, there is a lap addition. The original form is brick. So the reveal is proposed to match that, I believe. It's a little wider than typical. It's closer to between 5 and 6 inches. The Proposal does not include information about the garage doors and the window specifications just yet, but the other materials include carriage-style doors, composition shingle roof, and a stucco-coated foundation, which can be supported by the guidelines. The window style is emulative of the style of the addition and not as much of the historic form, which in this case is determined to be appropriate. The cumulative lot coverage is not an issue on this site. This is a rather large site, so the proposed new construction in relation to the existing construction added together in relation to the whole lot size only measures 8%. This is a very substantially sized lot. With that, it is recommended the commission approve the proposal with conditions, the conditions being that the carport be photographed satisfactorily for commission records, that the height of the accessory structure measure no more than 3 feet, or no less than 3 feet 6 inches different from the, let me reword that. That the height of the accessory structure measure at least 3 feet 6 inches lower than the overall ridge of the principal structure, as measured from the locations provided by the applicant in your Exhibit 1 that we just discussed. That all new windows have historic profile and dimension, and while these will be more emulative of the addition windows, that those materials be submitted for staff review and approval prior to issuance of a building permit, and that the garage doors be submitted for the same types of considerations as well. The application must meet all the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department, and any alterations to the approved plan by the commission must be submitted to staff or the commission for reconsideration of a COA. Thank you very much.
If you want to introduce yourself, Matt, I think you're supposed to give your address. Is that correct? Yes.
Okay, thanks. Matt Smith, 906 Studio Architects. The owners want to build a garage that also has an exercise area, or pool room. It'll have exercise machines in it. On the ground floor, along with a small bathroom and a little washer and dryer. And then above, a guest suite for the purpose of visiting children and grandchildren. And as Amanda stated, the goal is to have it complement the house and be subordinate to the main house. The distance from the road helps, since it'll be in excess of 170 feet from the road. 94 feet from the face of the house. And when I was doing the photo montage here, I realized that my estimate based on the GIS maps was perhaps I understated the drop. Instead of being 3.5 feet, I believe it's, based on doing this photo montage, I think it's going to be closer to 5 or something like that. But very conservatively, I can say it'll be at least 3.5 feet lower. But in reality, I think it will be more. You'll welcome any questions you have.
Do I have a motion on this project?
Madam Chair, I move to approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness for the demolition of the carport and the construction of the accessory structure.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any discussion?
I have a question or a concern.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at and I realize you've been to design review, but sometimes you see these things, when you see them in the final drawings. So you have a gable roof dormer on the house, but a shed roof dormer on the garage. And I wonder if that's the way that we want to let that be finished.
Yes, that is a good question, and I tried it both ways. And when I tried the dormer that would match the dormer style of the house, to me it looked like a mini-me situation, like it was trying a little too hard to emulate the house.
Right.
And so I wanted to kind of avoid that tendency.
Okay, I appreciate your comment.
Mr. Smith did provide that to me as well in a conversation before Design Review Committee, and I agree. It was drawing the eye a little bit more toward the overall ridge line, which is not what we would like to recommend here. So that is the reason staff supports that.
What I understand is the height of the actual building is 3.5 feet lower than the height of the actual garage, than the height of the actual house,
Yes.
with no consideration to grade.
Taking into consideration the grade. So on the exhibit, which shows that the side elevation of the house and the side elevation of the garage,
Matt, which, is it this page?
yes, and if you could zoom in on the dimension, well, if you compare the 25'6", in absolute terms, the height from grade is 25'6" for the house, and 23'6" for the garage unit.
That's
So
2 feet.
it's approximately 2 feet in absolute terms, and then taking into account the grade change, we arrive at the 3'6" number.
So it's 2 feet shorter, measured on the same grade, but it's 3.5 feet shorter with the grade change
Got it.
incorporated. And then the applicant mentioned that he believes that might be understated as well, that it may be that the perceived height difference is closer to 5 feet, which we, of course, would be supportive of.
And the square footage of the main house, the footprint is 2590, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Are there any
I
other
have two
questions?
So we are not,
Would you get your mic,
oh,
please?
we're not exceeding 35% here.
The lot coverage is not an issue at this site.
Okay,
I believe it's 18%, 18.7%.
okay. And then the other question is, I know that according to the guidelines, the square footage needs to be less than 60% of the lower level.
Correct.
And you have yours at 59.07%.
Yes.
Okay, so do those percentages include the attic space?
It doesn't appear that the attic space is designed to be as it was when it was presented to the design review committee. So I'll let the applicant speak to that more, but I'll zoom in on that section of the floor plan.
That would be correct. When you look at the floor plan of the second floor, you'll see that there is attic space that is on either side of the study and either side of the bedroom. However, it's not habitable. It would be very low space. So it wouldn't be something that the owners could expand and use in the future.
But to answer your question, Ms. Marquardt, I believe the attic space has been lessened, but I do believe that the applicant is not including the attic space as part of that 59%. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that is not something the guidelines are very clear on, and so that was a discussion brought
Yeah.
forward by the DRC during the August meeting as whether or not that 60% should be inclusive of attic space. Because that is not something that the guidelines are very clear on, we would need the commission to make, set that precedent on whether or not that's something that should be supported. The intent of the guideline is to limit the size of the upper floor and the height of the upper floor. And so by doing that, the recommendation is to have no more than 60% of the upper floor, or I'm sorry, the bottom floor be whatever it is, and then the upper floor be no more than 60% of that, to pull those walls in and to shorten the height. to force the use the dormers instead of having the wall go straight up. So the intent of the guideline isn't fully met in staff's opinion, but it isn't necessarily not, is not necessarily broken because it's not clear. The knee walls will be significantly shorter on the attic sections. And so it would not be considered habitable space by our Building and Neighborhood Services Department. And if you have any more specific questions to that, I know that Mr. Tosh could speak to that more succinctly than I can.
Yeah, as I'm reading it, I see at least one knee wall that's 7 feet, 10 inches tall. Is that correct? And the
Yes,
others are 6'8"?
6'8", correct.
So, Mr. Tosh, from a code standpoint, if you can answer it, what's the lowest point a knee wall should go to?
The code identifies habitable space when that wall reaches a point of 60 inches in height. And so anything below that is not considered habitable space.
Okay.
So the section at the study, that kind of connector area here, for all intents and purposes, I believe this area could be habitable unless I'm understanding it incorrectly.
If I had wanted to, let's say, maximize the area of the second floor, I could have moved the walls, that left wall and the right wall of the study out another, let's say, 18 inches or so. But there wasn't a need for that space, and of course, I was being mindful of the area.
So if we were looking at it from a code's perspective, he could push those walls from the 7 feet, 10 inches, or 6 feet, 8 inches to 5 feet, and it would all be considered habitable.
Correct.
The owners are very tall people, especially the husband, and they don't like, especially he doesn't like short walls.
Sure.
For obvious reasons.
Do you know what if you push those walls out to the 5-foot mark in the attic space, that would do to your percentage?
The percentage is at 59.07. I'm not good at math on the fly. It would push it, if I pushed each one a foot out, that would add 16 square feet, which would still possibly keep it in compliance, but it'd be really close. I'm not really sure, but.
I'm sympathetic to math on the fly, so I get that.
Yeah, I think everybody's point is well taken, that we've got to be considerate of how people are calculating these things, but specifically on garages, outbuildings, whatever they are, that are with a 1.5-story house. We also have that limit. I think where this rule will really become more apparent is when people have say a 4-square or a 2-story house. All of a sudden they can have a 2-story garage of sorts, full 2-story walls, and that's going to be a real challenge to get 60% only upstairs. And that's where those limits really, you need that rule to help control that scale. Whereas here, because it has to be 1.5 story, there's always going to be some cap, and then you don't count the stairs. So it's, even if you build out as much as you can upstairs, it's easier to get to 60% than it would be with a full 2-story outbuilding.
I agree with that point, but I do want to clarify that in most of the base zoning districts in the historic district areas, the zoning ordinance limits accessory structures to no more than a story and a half in scale. So it's not likely that a request for a 2-story garage, even if it were to be considered subordinate by the design guidelines, would be supported by the zoning ordinance.
Right.
And I guess my thought would be that the overall size of the building, whether or not it's attic space, counts.
Absolutely.
I would agree.
I think it contributes to the mass of the building.
The mass of the building. And I think what we're looking for is the mass of the building compared to the mass of the residents.
Yeah. I just think we have to be careful because, what you can end up having are people
Yeah.
who are pushing sinking in their walls and saying, I mean, the massing's still there. And if code says you can go to a 5-foot knee wall to be habitable space, we just gotta be careful about that.
Yeah,
Right.
and Matt, I think me specifically on other projects that we've seen from you and other folks, I think I've made the comment before that the idea that we have this bearing height that's not really at the top of the floor system, or the walls below, kind of creates this extra volume that does a lot of things. It creates more space above garage doors and windows, and it adds to the height. It's a massing thing. And, you know, you could stay with the exact same square footage you have of finished space and drop that bearing height, but as you know, everything suffers equally. So you probably, shower has to move in, and you go to a single vanity, and there's a lot of things that cascade off of that. But, you know, I would just say to be very careful and thoughtful about how high that second floor bearing wall is, because it's, I don't know, 3 feet there? What is it? It's not sitting on the ground, I know that. Or not sitting on the floor, I should say.
Yes, it's not, the roof is not bearing directly on the floor, the floor system, the top. There is a knee wall there. We try to minimize it. And then regarding the 60% rule, my understanding from reading it was that it was habitable space, that we were discussing habitable space, as well as with discussions from DRC and with Amanda. So I did proceed based on that direction with that, not counting the attic space.
I believe the DRC did not really give direction one way or the other, because this is the first time we've reviewed an application in light of the new guideline. It's the first request for the type of application that would consider that guideline. So I in all fairness, I do think it was discussed at DRC, and it was sort of, you know, left in the open as to whether or not that's something that should be considered. I would ask the applicant if it's possible to understand if that in light of Mr. LaMarinelle's comment, if that overall ridge could be lowered a little bit more. I've lowered it as much as I'm able to in order to make the functions work. And I met with the owners, and it's lowered to the lowest that they're comfortable with. So I have not been given the green light from them to make it any lower.
If I remember at DRC, we talked about, was it possible to scoot the garage over a bit behind the house? And I don't know if that happened or not.
And it did not. They're
Did
planning to
not.
put a swimming pool there.
Right.
And they don't want to compromise that space. When you look at the site plan, the garage does sit behind the house, and the photo composites that I made affirm that. Page 8 of the submittal.
Okay. Well, we have a proper motion
go
and a
to the-
second. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, and then the right photo there, if you scroll over. And then even on the left photo, I know you don't take into account the landscaping, but in reality, you would not see very much of that because of the large trees.
I'm sorry, Ms.
Photoshop.
Pierce, did you say something?
I said we have a motion and a second. I was asking if there was any other discussion.
Just one final math question, math on the fly. The square footage is at 59.0% on the top.
Yes,
Correct.
ma'am.
That is not including the attic space.
Correct.
If we
That's right.
were to include the attic space, what would that percent look like?
It would be over the 60%, and then the percentage of the accessory structure to the main house is at 47.6. I didn't need for the footprint to be any larger. But I suppose I would have to take a look at that number and perhaps maximize the footprint of the entire garage or something like that, and kind of work with those percentages. In reality, I'm not sure if that would affect the visual, or, you know, how the garage looks. So I didn't want to go down that path.
I was asking because we are looking at this guideline kind of with new eyes, and I think we need to be careful how we assess the attic space in terms of that percentage. So that's why
Sure, I
I was
understand.
wondering if you had just a
Like-
educated
Like
guess.
like a 7-foot wall, if it starts up here and given the slope, you know, it's gonna, within just a couple feet, it's not gonna be habitable. So when you look at that area in plan, it looks like there's more potentially attic or habitable space than there is. You could shove some boxes back there. But in real terms, it's not usable, so.
Could you place your cursor over the attic space, Amanda?
It's everything inside of the dotted lines that's not within
I see.
the dark line.
Okay.
So all this space here and here. And to Mr. Smith's point, and again, my colleague, Mr. Tosh, can speak to it more. You know, the walls are at different spaces, 6.5 or 6 feet 8 inches, or at one place 7 feet 10 inches. Once that slope drops off, it becomes uninhabitable quickly. Now, it may very well be, and I'm just eyeballing this without a lot of expertise in this, but the study, for example, could be bumped out internally, maybe up to 2 feet if that, but then you start to lose, like you would not be able to have habitable space beyond that. So it is something that I really appreciate that the commission's bringing forward. It's very thoughtful of you. I don't know that everyone could fully appreciate how difficult the review is because of the guideline and the intent for the guideline. But the intent is to have you know, more subservient accessory structures, because that is what our community told us loud and clear during our surveying when we were writing the new guidelines. So thank you for bringing that forward.
To kind of follow up on Commissioner Markart's comment, I mean, that 6.8 knee wall is on the front as well. So if you start looking, that's, you know, another 20 inches that there's a drop of where the code says it's habitable space if you get to the 5-foot mark. So I do think it's something new we're having to deal with, but at least our code says that you can have a 5-foot knee wall. And so when people choose to build a taller knee wall, I respect that. I understand the reasons for it, but it could be expanded down to 5 feet and be habitable space. So to me, that's the most logical analysis I can get to as to what we probably ought to include, because they could make it that large.
Yeah, and
So-
that's, you know, I know from working in like City of Belmead, it's everything 5 feet or taller, even if it's in the 3rd-story attic that doesn't even have access, you have to count it. And that's just a fair way to say, this is what the code counts, we're gonna count all of that. It just is what it is.
Yeah, 'cause
Makes it easy
otherwise-
for everybody to calculate too.
Right, otherwise you could have a 9-foot, so you could choose to have 9-foot
Yeah.
walls. And then there's 4 feet drop that they could theoretically have, and that all goes to the massing. So I think until I have a better understanding of how that percentage and calculation would work out at the 5-foot mark, and I realize I'm sympathetic because we're all working through this together for the first time, I would have a hard time supporting it absent understanding that better.
Yeah.
Would you want to offer an amendment?
I don't think I have the information
Okay.
to support it tonight.
I
Okay.
think we probably ought to look at a deferral
Okay.
until we're real more, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about this, and I think a deferral is in order at this point.
And we're sorry you're first.
Do you want to recommend for a deferral?
Yes, I'm going to recommend that the 436 Boyd Mill Avenue, that we defer to the next voting meeting in November.
November the 14th.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I would ask before
Yes.
there's a vote that the commission give some very clear guidance to the applicant on what to bring forward at the next meeting and perhaps attend the DRC meeting.
I feel like Josh's
Yeah, I'm happy.
comments and Tyler's speak to,
I think from my perspective, I would want to see what those percentages work out if you took it to a 5-foot knee wall, given that that's what's permitted under
Just
the
a
code.
diagram. And if you
Yeah.
feel like you want to ask for more than that, we would hear your hardship argument. But it
Okay.
would have to be that, I think, for me.
I just think this is one that is going to set a lot of precedent for a lot of
Yes.
projects going forward, so I think we have to be very careful about that.
Yes.
okay, we have a motion and a second to defer. And does that explanation meet?
Yes, I just
staff?
want to make sure
Okay.
that's clear for the record.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Mr. Smith, would you like to attend DRC on Monday?
On Monday? Possibly, yeah.
Okay, I have to put the agenda together first thing in the morning, so I'll put you on there and let me know if you change your mind.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 6 is consideration of alterations to buildings, partial demolition, additions, roof lines, windows. Get my glasses on again. I'm sorry, y'all. This just happened to me. Windows, doors, alterations to site and setting, parking, landscaping, lighting, walkways, driveways, walls, fences, grading, relocation of existing accessory with inside, and relocation of building onto site at 423 South Margin Street. And Stephanie Stewart is the applicant. And do you want to start,
Yes,
Amanda?
thank you.
Do you
If I
want
may,
to
I'm
take
just-
it
I'm
one
going to
by?
excuse myself.
Okay,
From
thank
this
you.
one,
Thank you,
yes.
Mr. Dunn.
Do you want to take it one by one, or how would you like to handle this?
Thank you for asking, Ms. Pierce. I do think that, in full disclosure, that the agenda listing that you see is very long because it is staff's role to communicate every request by an applicant thoroughly so that the public can understand what's going on. So this is really a major rehabilitation project, so it incorporates a lot of things, and that's why it has a very long agenda caption. So thank you for bearing with me and reading that. Because it has a lot of items, sometimes it's best to break them up one by one, and I'm happy to do that. But I believe that most of the requests are very specific to the main structure on the house. And so what I would probably recommend is that I break it up by the Winstead house, even its additions, and then the relocation request of the two structures, one onto the site and one within the site, and then maybe fences and walls separately from that. Is that fair?
Yes, and I think the other would be some amendments to a building that exists on the site that isn't the Winstead House.
That's correct. Thank you
Yeah.
for mentioning that, the carriage house. So
So-
I'll break it up that way. I don't know that it's, I have not provided separate motions for everything. I have one collective motion. So
Okay.
it may be that you discuss them individually and then decide if you want to make independent motions or not.
Okay.
Okay, so the applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the series of work that Ms. Pierce described at 423 South Margin Street, formerly known as the Omar College of Design. The subject property includes the circa 1845 Winstead House, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places for significance in architecture. The property also includes the circa 1895 historic structure identified by the applicant as the Hainsbury House. The structure incorporates elements of a masonry Queen Anne style. The historic accessory building identified as the smokehouse is also on the site, as well as a non-contributing carriage house. The entire property is part of the Franklin National Register Historic District and immediately adjacent to the Lewisburg Avenue National Register Historic District. The applicant did appear before the DRC to discuss the most recent version of this proposal at its July meeting. So I do want to make a quick note. The applicant sought voluntary feedback, it's not required, sought voluntary feedback from the staff at the Tennessee Historical Commission, which is our State Historic Preservation Office. The State Historic Preservation Office is the state-level preservationists that provide expert guidance on projects on the National Register. The local jurisdiction requires that the guidelines be met. The design guidelines are based in the Secretary of Interior standards, but can be more thorough and more descriptive because those standards are only 10 in count, and they're not very prescriptive. So I say that to say that the applicant did seek that voluntary feedback, and we do appreciate that. Unfortunately, the voluntary feedback did not get to the applicant until the day that the application materials were due. And so the applicant wanted to indicate to staff and to you that some of those changes may have already been implemented into the plan had they had the comments sooner. So please don't believe that in relaying what the SHPO said, that the applicant chose to ignore that. That's not necessarily the case at all. Okay, so the way that staff has broken up the analysis is to follow the plan that you see on the screen. It is a lot of pages. You can see it's 59 pages here, and so I did my best to follow this script so that's easier to follow along. So I'm going to start with parking, walkways, and driveways. The alterations generally correspond to the pages 7 and 8, and then 22 and 23 of the application. So I'm going to skip to that. So here's the paving diagram. The applicant has significantly reduced the number of hardscape areas proposed in the front lawn. We all know that this project has come forward to the DRC and the Historic Zoning Commission in various capacities over the last year and a half or so. So when I say that they've significantly reduced, I mean over the course of the entirety of the discussion. This is in keeping with the recommendations of the guidelines, which state that traditional lawn areas should be maintained and not replaced with significant landscaping or hardscapes. The guidelines also note the layout of new sidewalks and walkways should take placement of historic trees into consideration. And from the materials provided to staff, it does not appear that many trees are being removed to accommodate the pedestrian path specifically. As for the parking and driveways, the location of the proposed drive aisle from Lewisburg Avenue is right here. I'll change to the hand here. So this is a proposed new drive aisle. It is similar to the location of an existing driveway. Previous renditions proposed the construction of a circular drive, which the guidelines do not support. Because of this, the applicant removed the circular component, which in turn lessened the amount of hardscaping pretty significantly. The removal of a 1940s historic stone wall along the Lewisburg Avenue area here. It's proposed to accommodate a drive aisle relocation and a roadway alteration that's required by the city of Franklin. The retaining wall location is to be relocated within feet of the current one, and is determined to be necessary by the city, and because of that, the wall relocation is reviewed further later in the application. The guidelines recommend that parking follow historic patterns and that they minimize the visual impact of parking by following those patterns by locating them along a rear or side elevations of buildings. Parking for non-residential uses in residential buildings, like this situation here, should be located behind the building and should be further screened off-site. All parking is now located to the rear and I believe to behind the front facade of the historic building, and therefore meets the intent of the guidelines. Okay, I'm going to move on to grading, which roughly corresponds to the next few pages here. The guidelines recommend that one avoid significantly altering or grading the topography of a property, and that's pretty well understood. The property, in a theoretical sense, should not be altered in such a way, not only for the building itself, but also the land on which it's situated, to be different than what is character defining of it historically. So that is why this is included within the application. The grading plan has been altered to lessen impacts to the front lawn overall. Significant grading is still proposed in the area immediately in front of the Winstead House, however. That creates a more formal landing. And I'm going to go ahead and skip to that page so you can see it. If you look at the screen, you can see the Winstead House. There is a request to infill the grading here is to allow for a 3-foot tall retaining wall at its maximum height and to install a refurbished iron fence of a 3-foot height on top of that. That's to kind of create a formal landing space. By virtue, it's an extension of the porch in a lot of ways because the grade would not be very different from that at the porch landing. The proposal is altering the experience of that site pretty significantly in light of the Secretary of Interior standards and the Historic District Design Guidelines, and this portion of the proposal cannot be supported. The State Historic Preservation Office also provided comments on this, which are in line with the guidelines. Specifically, the State Historic Preservation Office stated that in order to meet the guidelines, it would recommend that this grading be shortened or avoided overall. And it would be the recommendation of local staff here that it be avoided overall. It could create a false sense of historic character and a feeling that is out of scale with the original Italianate design. It does lessen the intensity of the porch because the grading on most porches is significant, or the ground level is significantly lower than the porch itself, and that would not be the case here. It would be nearly flush. At the hyphen addition on the front of the house, I'm going to skip to the next page. You see that here. I've been told by the applicant that some additional research has indicated that this hyphen addition was actually built around 1990, and it is flanked to the right of the historic home. You can see the front wall of the historic home here. The proposal for the grading seeks to modify the grade at this facade to accommodate the construction of an 8-foot wide ramp to allow for ADA access. The guidelines recommend that ramps be constructed of wood or concrete. The guidelines intimate that a ramp is actually constructed, and I think the intent of the applicant here is to not really build out a ramp so much as to alter the grade to accommodate the needed slope to accommodate ADA. So without information on how that would look, it's difficult for staff to support that at this time. Ramps are really recommended to be at rear or lesser visible elevations. This would be primarily on the front facade, albeit on a non-historic portion of the front facade. The guidelines also, as I noted previously, recommend that one avoid significantly altering or grading the topography of a property. And since it's not clear how the grade is proposed to be situated at this location, because there is no elevation or a cross-section to provide the information on how that would be done, it's not clear if this proposal meets the intent of the guidelines. I also want to note that the State Historic Preservation Office provided similar feedback, noting that the extension of this area through the grading and the implementation of a ramp is not appropriate. The state stated that if an ADA ramp cannot be located behind the structure, and I don't believe that's the applicant's intent because they're intending to wall that off because it's a ticketed location, or a private location rather, that it be modified so that it's at least behind the plane of the front wall of the house, and that it not physically tie into the historic structure. Landscape screening is also encouraged to help mitigate any adverse impacts. Again, local staff does not feel there's enough information to understand the intent here to be able to support it at this time. Okay, I'm moving on to other elements of site and setting, which will be lighting. The guidelines recommend that new light fixtures be designed and placed to be compatible with and subordinate to the historic buildings and the surrounding historic context. One should use existing or ambient street light rather than adding new lighting wherever possible. But if new fixtures are necessary, one should use concealed lighting or fixtures that are simple in character but compatible with the placement, design, scale, materials, and quality of lighting on adjacent historic buildings. Install lighting at the ground level of buildings only and use footlights for residential driveways and walkways instead of large freestanding post or post-mounted lights. This page is the lighting diagram. It just shows the location of the proposed lights. Most of them are ground-mounted and more subdued. The guidelines provide considerations for illumination, noting that the use of a warm light would be appropriate so as to not to distort the color of materials and finishes, that one avoid using colored bulbs or gels as we've seen happen in some places. While I don't know the intent of the color, I believe the intent is a warmer tone, but it does appear, with that said, that the majority of the lighting fixtures meet the intent of the guidelines. However, there are some pole lights indicated at the rear of the property. You see those here. There's some here. And the guidelines do state that residential driveways, walkways should avoid those. Now, this is a use that's not proposed to be residential, but the guidelines review things by form. The site historically was residential, and the forms on the site are residential. So it's recommended that the commission think this through and make a recommendation based on that consideration of whether or not the pole lights would be appropriate in this context or not. They are changing the use. The Historic Zoning Commission does not contemplate use, but contemplates form and context, and the context is residential, and the guidelines recommend that residential contexts do not have pole lights. Okay, moving on to fences and walls. Ms. Pierce, do you want me to stop, or do you want to?
No, I think let's do like we were saying. We'll do the exterior and then we'll move.
Do the individual buildings? Okay, great. So I think this will be the last section before we jump to the buildings. Okay, so as fences and walls, I tried to divide it by the color coding provided by the applicant on page 24 of the application, if that's helpful to you. Okay, so the purple color shown on the screen is an area that represents a proposed 7-foot tall brick wall with an open weave along the upper half that's all located behind the Winstead House to enclose a courtyard. This design and location are supported by the guidelines. And there's a few colors that correspond to each other. There's a light blue, an orange, and a yellow. You see those primarily down at the roadway. Those areas represent the removal and the relocation or the new construction of brick and stone retaining walls to accommodate the city regulations for the right-of-way and the roadway. Essentially, I believe the city is requiring that left turn lane be installed on Lewisburg Avenue and requires a certain portion of right-of-way to be installed. And because of that, the applicant is relocating some historic and non-historic walls within a few feet of where they are currently. The applicant's intent is to reuse existing materials and to supplement them with matching materials if necessary. The guidelines can support new retaining walls in primary yards, but also recommend that one minimizes changes to the topography from those resulting elements. The applicant provided information to demonstrate the existing conditions versus the proposed conditions, and then the graded conditions. On page 29 of the application, which I'll go to right now. Make sure this is 29. You can see the applicant has really tried to do that well here. It demonstrates the proposed stepped condition. So, for example, what you see on the screen where my cursor is the area of Lewisburg Avenue where the Rosenwald School is proposed to be relocated to the site. You can see there is a stone wall And then there's a stepped condition where it's recessed back a few feet before you have a brick wall. And then on top of that brick wall is a proposed iron gate. This stepped condition helps minimize the impact of the relocation, and in fact is actually going to create a condition that's shorter than the existing retaining wall height. So you'll actually be able to see more of the site now than you can now, based on the proposal that is before you. The intent, again, for the stepping is to not have a wall go straight up, and it really would significantly change the grading. It is staff's belief this is the most sympathetic way to achieve that, and minimize any sort of grading changes to it. And that information has been provided throughout, and tries to emulate the materials and the existing materials you see on the upper part of the screen in order to achieve that. I'm going to go back to page 24. So the green color here represents the front wall retaining walls. And when I say front yard, I mean the lawn in front of the Winstead house. There is a proposal to incorporate maximum of 2 feet retaining walls to be able to allow for some hillside plantings and a display garden at the center of the lawn. These are appropriate as it does not appear that the existing topography would be altered extensively as a result of these new elements. The green area notes retaining walls directly in front of the Winstead house as well, which corresponds to that area that I described previously with the graded condition at the front porch. So the green areas are supported with the exception of this green area because that cannot be supported. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. The dark blue area, that is primarily right in front of the building at the street. This area represents the location of an existing brick wall and decorative iron fencing, and that's just proposed to be maintained and repaired as necessary, so no actions needed. The dotted purple area is here in front of the house. And that represents an existing decorative iron fence to be placed onto the top of that retaining wall. Again, that retaining wall is not supported, so having the fence there on top of it would not be supported either. And now the last one is this dotted red color, which is really around the perimeter and the driveway area tying up to the house. This area represents the proposed decorative iron fencing atop of the relocated and rebuilt retaining walls, and then also a decorative iron fence that follows the proposed driveway up to the house that would kind of separate the front lawn from the driveway. It appears that the proposal meets the intent of the guidelines for the material, for the height, and for the placement. I did want to note that on page 25 of the application, it does state that the design of this courtyard wall is subject to change. And I just want to put on record that as shown now, it's supported. Any changes would require reapproval. So just keep that in mind as a note to the applicant. Okay, so that concludes the portion of the application related to the site and setting. Would you like me to pause so the commission can discuss?
I think,
Okay.
and to let the applicant speak
Okay,
on this
great.
portion.
Before the applicant speaks, I do want to note that I have not received any comment cards from the attendees. So we would need those so that Ms. Pierce can call those. So if you do plan to speak as a citizen on this project, please get a comment card filled out and given to me before Mr. Gamble finishes speaking. Thanks.
If you'll introduce yourself and your
Hi, yes, my name
address.
is Greg Gamble, and I'm representing the applicant, the Heritage Foundation, tonight. Stephanie Stewart is allowing me to introduce our team and speak on our behalf. I am so excited to be a part of this team focused on the preservation of these historic buildings right on Margin and Lewisburg. They absolutely have and will continue to contribute to the city of Franklin. And as I said, it's really an honor to be a part of this team. The use of this building prior to the involvement of the Heritage Foundation was non-residential. O'Moore College did not bring much of this campus up to the current code requirements of the city of Franklin for non-residential buildings. The Heritage Foundation is required to do that. That burden falls on them. The entire site must be brought up to the current codes for non-residential buildings. That includes ADA handicap accessibility, ADA parking. It includes lighting for the site. And our team has been working diligently to do this in a way that's respectful to the residential district that these buildings sit in. But this building is no longer being used as a residential use. So that burden to bring those standards up now falls on the Heritage Foundation, and you never know what you're going to get into until you start. And so that process has started, and we're moving through that process now. It is exciting that we have the opportunity to be a part of the relocation of the Lee Buckner School to this campus. That requires Board of Zoning Appeals variance approval, which is our next step. After that, we have a site plan submittal that will go to city staff for review and then planning commission. There are some details, though, that we're still contemplating that are going to have to come back to the Historic Zoning Commission for a certificate of appropriateness. And we understand that, and I'm going to outline what those are so you understand kind of this linear process that we're going through. But we still need to have Board of Zoning Appeals approval. We still need to have Planning Commission approval. So your recommendation is the first step in this process. Amanda outlined several recommendations for you to consider as a part of your approval tonight. The first one, Amanda, if you don't mind turning to page 13, I believe is the one that you had it on, that shows the front of the Winstead house. Shows the proposed retaining wall in front, the wrought iron fence around. We understand this comment, and we're going to follow the recommendation that's proposed by staff. So this will be changing. The second consideration, in accordance with the guidelines, relates to the handicap accessibility route that we have located just to the right in the portion that was described by Amanda as being approximately 1990s. One thing to point out is that the proposed ADA accessible ramp will be the width of the existing stairs. So I know it was mentioned 8 feet. What's being proposed is the width of the existing stairs that are here. We have a requirement for non-residential commercial structures that ADA accessibility be as close to, if not the same, experience as someone who is not require ADA accessibility. So in this particular alignment, being on the front here, we're allowed to, or we can bring them through the same kind of security process that you would go through if you're entering into this facility, even through the front doors. So locating it in this location will comply with the code requirements for a commercial non-residential structure. Second, with the State Historic Preservation Office, they did add that if the ADA ramp cannot be located behind the structure, it is recommended that it remain behind the front building line with a low profile. We can accommodate that. They also stated that it does not need to have a physical connection to the historic structure, meaning that in the event something happens in the future, we can just take that out without disturbing any of the historic structure in the future. We can also do that. We can make sure that when this is constructed, there's a clear expansion joint between the proposed ramp and the existing structure. But we do have a requirement and responsibility to provide ADA accessibility to this building in a way that meets the requirement of the commercial codes as well. We understand that this is one item that staff would like to come back to the Historic Zoning Commission with more information. So that's going to have to come back to you, and we understand that. Recommendation number 3. Well, let me add to that number 2 real quick. Because there is a site plan review process that engineering needs to weigh in on, as well as Building and Codes Department to weigh in on. We'd like to go through that process to make sure that we have our grading plan dialed in. You know exactly what you're going to be reviewing when we come back to you for that certificate of appropriateness on this ramp. The third, item number 3,
The post?
wait. Oh, yeah, the post-mounted lights. Again, this is another one of those items that we need to go through staff review and planning commission review on. They review our lighting plan. We have to meet the zoning code requirements for commercial structures for parking lots. There's no exceptions to that in our zoning ordinance. We want to limit the number of post-mounted lights. We would much rather have this low profile and meet the residential guidelines. There's no doubt about that, but at the same time, we have this requirement in the zoning code to meet the requirements for the parking lot. So this is an item, number 3, that will also have to come back to Historic Zoning Commission once we have more information from the Planning Commission on what they're supporting, and then we'll have to come back to you for certificate of appropriateness. So we understand the recommendations for numbers 1, 2, and 3, and I think those can be addressed as we go through the process of the City of Franklin. Is that correct, Amanda?
Yes, Mr. Gamble's correct. This requires a site plan approval by the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission, and the lighting is something that I would hope that the commission can comment on one way or the other. It may require that it come back, depending on your position on it, but ultimately, if it does come back, we could have more information for you about the standards that will apply for the site plan component. It may be that the applicant works with staff to do research to determine if there's an alternative means to provide the recommended lighting amount for those areas without being on pole structures, or that the pole structures be limited in height, or that you approve the pole structures. It's just giving information tonight will help inform so that Mr. Gamble and myself and the rest of the city team can work through those and bring anything back to you as needed. As far as the grading, it is something that the applicant will have to provide for the Planning Commission review and approval. At this time, it's important for the commission to provide guidance through a motion, one way or the other, of whether or not it would support those grading alterations proposed at both the front of the Winstead House and then in front of the hyphened area. If they're not supported, then it could be deferred so that the applicant can work through based on the comments that you provide and come back at another date and time after we've vetted through the whole city process to be able to better inform you about what those would look like.
Well, we're comfortable with condition of approval number 1, so
Okay.
I think that
With,
we can adjust that.
With, what did you're comfortable with?
The recommendation of staff for the condition number 1,
The con-
not to have the retaining wall and
In
not to
front
do
of the
what's
main
proposed.
house.
Yeah, we're fine with that.
Right, that's what I
Yeah.
got so far, is that you are comfortable with eliminating the front grading right in front of the house, that you would provide more details on the ramp, and that the lights, we are not approving those
No,
tonight? Is that what you're saying?
no, it's, and there's no motion on the table, so I know that you're not deliberating right now, but the recommendation of staff is to determine whether or not the pole lights meet the intent of the guidelines. The rest of the guidelines are, the rest of the lighting plan, in staff's opinion, meets the guidelines, with the
just the
exception of the pole lights.
Okay, got you.
And then once you provide that information through a motion this evening, then the staff and the applicant can work together to adjust accordingly to meet all the other standards of the city that apply. And bring anything back to you that would be necessary to bring back.
Okay.
And I guess my point in that is that this is somewhat of an adaptive reuse of these existing buildings. And again, exciting to be a part of the preservation of these structures, but there are some details in here that don't necessarily exactly line up with the non-residential use and the requirements that the city has for those uses. And we know that we need to bring a few items back, and those are details regarding the ramp and the lighting. We're happy to do that. We are fine with the recommendations 4 through 8. No issues there. I will say that there is a third item that we will bring bring,
Mr. Gamble, if I can interrupt,
Yeah, sure.
I haven't presented on 4 through 8
I know,
yet.
I was
No.
just commenting on that we don't have any issues with
Yeah,
those.
I was going to say, I think what we're going to try to do is do this section. So, and then we'll go to the next
Right.
section.
So one of the last things site-related that is not in your packet, but we're going to be bringing to you is a fencing plan for the exterior boundary of the property. We've been working with several neighbors, and we plan on having additional meetings as we refine and come up with a definitive landscape plan and fencing plan for the exterior of the property. That's not in your packet today.
Yeah.
We plan on working through that, but really, we want to get past the milestone of the site plan process first. There are kind of more bigger hurdles that we need to cross, but we are not diminishing the fact at all that our neighbors would like our answers regarding what we're doing regarding the fencing along the outside boundaries. So we're moving that up to a priority, but it's going to take us a little bit more time.
Okay, is there anyone from your team that would like to speak on the items you've covered so far? Or,
If you have any additional questions, our entire team is here to answer those for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure you knew our positions on numbers 1, 2, and 3.
okay, and I would just, as council, do we defer the approval of everything, or can we take it by sections?
Actually, that's the question I had as we were going on. Ms. Rose, if you could clarify what's actually before the commission at this moment?
Everything that I brought forward to you this evening's up for the commission to discuss. Mr. Gamble has mentioned that there's some changes that the applicant agrees with staff to complete. It's asked that you make a motion one way or the other on everything I just mentioned, which would be,
It's all,
bear with me, the parking driveways, walkways, the grading alterations, the lighting, and the fences and walls. If there is a disagreement with the plan, then you should vote to note that. The applicant's just simply making it clear that they're open to staff's comments and that they will adjust accordingly.
Yeah,
But you do need to have action on that.
but I'm asking, is it okay for us to vote on this one section? I'm asking council instead of the whole project, and then go to the next section?
You certainly can.
Just for the sake of memory
Yes, you can.
and for their sake? So I'm
I would ask if that's the intent, the staff's recommended motion does not match that. So you would need to create a motion that mentions those headings that I just
Right.
mentioned, which is parking, walkways, driveways, lighting, grading alterations, and fences and walls.
May I make a comment? I honestly am having a hard time with grouping all this together. And I feel like we need to take each point as a motion. Because we're making changes right here in this room. And I think we're not going to be comfortable with all of this without, the way we're going.
Well, if that's the direction that the vice chair, I can certainly work through that.
Yeah, what I had recommended, and we'll just have a quick chat about this, was that we take the part we've taken right now and make a motion and a decision, vote on that, and then we go to the House next. But do you want it, are you suggesting breaking it down more than that?
Yes, I am,
Okay,
By number here.
by numbers, because
By
I think
numbers,
this is
okay.
just too important.
okay.
Okay.
Then I would ask council again, we've got people that want to comment, so at what point is that appropriate if we're doing it, by separate
I
items?
think that's a question, how much more presentation is left? I mean, are we gonna,
There's a significant amount of presentation
That's what I was
left. So with that being the case, what I would recommend, and this is just my recommendation, it sounds like Ms. Besser suggesting that there be a motion independent on parking, walkways, driveways, then one on grading alterations, and one on lighting, so on and so forth.
Right, because we've just eliminated number one.
Well,
part of it.
The applicant's suggesting they'd like to eliminate number
Okay.
one. Yes, action still needed by the commission. So I would suggest that you allow staff to finish providing the analysis in full. And then the commission have a motion one by one by one. That way the citizens can comment after staff makes the analysis presentation. The citizens are welcome then to comment on any portion of the application he or she would like to make a comment to. It would be unfair to ask a citizen to make a determination on where their comment falls into the discussion.
Yeah, I was going to do it just by sections, but if we're doing every single item, then you do that.
Okay,
All of it, is that what y'all are saying? And then the
the motions will be broken down.
applicant will make their presentation on every single item.
Yes.
And then the citizens that wish to speak.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Okay,
so I suggest that you keep any the questions you have in your mind, because it's going to be
I know it's a lot.
lengthy. Yeah.
okay, so I have finished parking, driveways, walkways, grading alterations, lighting, fences and walls. So that's most of site and setting. Now I'm turning to alterations to the existing buildings. I'll start with the Winstead House, the main house on the site. That roughly corresponds to page 14. And then again, 43 through 52 of the application. So the proposal seeks to demolish select non-historic additions on the building. That corresponds to the page that you see on the screen here. The dark colors are proposed to be removed from the existing building. As we're all aware, there are significant numbers of additions that are non-historic on the building. And, you know, the sections that you see on, is there a question? It's on page 43. And on the screen, you can see the areas where the applicant's requesting to remove certain non-historic areas. The guidelines support demolition if a building, or in this case, a portion of the building, has no historical or architectural integrity. It is the federal standard that the city has more or less adopted that any section of a building less than 50 years in age is considered non-historic, and for that reason, portions of the building that are proposed to be demolished can be supported in that respect. The alterations also include, just changes to select additions that are proposed to remain. At the location of this 1990s era hyphen at the front of the building, we've already discussed that the grading's proposed to change, but in addition, the existing fenestration is proposed to be altered to allow for 2 entrance doors. That would allow for ADA access, I believe is the intent there. Let me see if I can find that photograph. Must be on a different page.
47?
47, thank you. I'm trying really hard to make it less complicated. Okay, so you can see on page 47, the proposed fenestration change. I believe the intent is to allow for the doors to open with enough clearance to allow for ADA accessibility. As a non-historic element on the building, the alteration is appropriate. The guidelines would recommend and support the door replacement, noting that new doors and doorways to an addition should be designed to be compatible with the historic district and to read as secondary in appearance and detailing. It is staff's opinion that this meets the intent of the guidelines. I do want to note that the State Historic Preservation Office did also comment on this and suggested something similar. So the applicant modified based on that State Historic Preservation Office comment because that comment came before the other comments. Now I'm moving on to that mansard roof structure that's existing at the back of the building. Let me find the best photo of that.
What page?
So I'm going to zoom in here and try to show this as best as I can. This is the back of the property. And you all have walked the site. This is mainly for the, for the record and for the benefit of the folks seated behind me. But you can see there's a significant addition at the back of the building that it looks to be built sometime in the 70s or 80s to accommodate, the growing change, the use changes in the building. The applicant would like to keep this section that has what we're calling a mansard roof here and to reskin it in order to be more compatible with the the historic building form. Specifically, the modification includes modifying the roof line into a hipped form, which lowers its scale, recladding it in lap siding with closed shutters to emulate fenestration. You can see that on this south elevation here, and then on the model here. And adding a small covered entrance to the courtyard facade that you see where my cursor is located. The guidelines generally support the proposed alterations as the roof line, material, and fenestration changes are designed to be in keeping with the original building, and the changes improve the overall structure's appropriateness within the historic district as recommended by the guidelines. Also worth noting, at the DRC's recommendation, the applicant has utilized a lap siding as opposed to the brick to help simplify the form and to read as subordinate on this courtyard area. So you can see on the elevation here on the screen, there is some lap at the back of the building from existing additions. There's a large amount of brick, and the existing building is sided, and they'd like to use a cementitious lap siding to reclad it instead of the brick that was previously discussed at DRC. New additions are also proposed. And I'll go ahead and start, since I'm on this page, go ahead and start at the addition that you see here. So the mansard roof area is really just the footprint that you see in this taller form with the hipped roof. This area with the loggia porch in front of it is proposed to be added. The guidelines recommend that additions be compatible with the historic building, yet clearly identifiable through the use of differentiating methods. In this case, the differentiating methods are the size, the height, and the inset from both walls. And in this case, the location, design, scale, massing, and height are all appropriate on that addition. Okay, moving back up to page 43. We'll talk about the loggia. So you can see on the screen, there's an area that is proposed to be added to the existing hyphen at the side and then wrap around the back. And that is really a porch. I'm going to go to the elevation so you can see that. So you can see that on the west elevation here on page, I believe this is page 51. So the rendering shows it wrap around the existing hyphen, side, and then go back behind the building. The guidelines recommend that one, design new porches and stoops to be at rear or side facades with minimal visibility, and to avoid adding porches or stoops to front facades or highly visible facades if they did not exist historically. As such, the portion of this loggia area that is on the side can't be supported because it is on the side elevation that's highly visible. New porches should be added at rear facades. In this case, you do experience this area. It is a non-historic addition, and by adding to the non-historic addition in a primary area, you're accentuating a non-historic area that probably would not have been supported by guidelines had they applied in 1990 when this was built on. So with that in mind, it is recommended that this wraparound portion be removed and that it would be appropriate to maintain the rear portion that you can see on the site plan here. The State Historic Preservation Office also recommended that the porch be removed from that west facade and only be implemented at the rear. Now on page 48, the applicant's requesting to rebuild a section of the building that, page 48. My PDF numbers don't correspond with the page numbers, that's why I'm off a little bit.
That's unfortunate.
I know. So you can see on page 48 here, there is an area that's rendered in the model where my cursor is showing. And then on the actual elevations, you can see it here. The applicant has referenced a historic photograph, and you can see it on the top right, where they'd like to reconstruct that portion. While the proposed addition does not appear to match the historic photograph in its entirety, it does appear to me to have slightly different proportions. The side porch does appear to generally match the scale of that evidenced in the photograph. The guidelines recommend against the construction of porches or stoops onto front facades if they didn't exist historically. So because this did exist historically and it's generally in keeping with that, I would not call this a true restoration, but it is evidence that it did exist there, and you can see some ghosting on the building itself that indicates that as well. The side porch can be supported. Now, the proposal also includes to rebuild an existing ramp on that east side elevation. Those of you that are less familiar with the site, I'm going to pull that up. So this is the left side. And current conditions, you can see on this bottom right photograph, it's a fun ramp that was built on the side of the building, probably when some of this addition was constructed. The applicant would like to keep a ramp element, but they're actually, in theory, requesting to remove this and rebuild it within an enclosed addition. So you can see that on the model to the left of it. And then you see that here. That would implement that, that previously existing side porch into that enclosed area to have a ramp that would allow for folks to access this portion of the museum area within an ADA conditioned space. The guidelines recommend that ramps be designed simply with reversibility that offers minimum impact and does not involve the removal of historic features. One should place ramps on rear side elevations where not readily visible, if possible, and designed as an addition, as you see here. The alteration is recessed from and behind the original historic form. It's designed in keeping with the building and offers minimal visibility from street views. With that, it's generally supported. Now, the last alteration to the Winstead building includes an addition at the upper level. You can kind of see that area here. It's this section here and here. So I'm going to skip to page 50. That was 50. Okay. Okay, so the section is a second level footprint change to fill in a break between the loft addition here that's existing and the historic original portion of the building. The photograph's going to help show that a little bit more, so I'm going to zoom in here. So you see that break? There's a bit of a break there.
Like a recess.
Yes. So this corresponds, if you're looking at the floor plan, to the storage and janitor closet area. The guidelines recommend that additions be compatible with the historic building, yet differentiated through methods like roof breaks, wall insets, wall offsets, material changes, etc. A combination of these should be considered when an addition is employed. In this instance, a meaningful existing facade break is already there. And so when this addition was put on, whether or not you personally like the addition, this portion was done in a way, at least on the upper floor, where you could tell the break between the historic house and the addition. This is an evolution over time. You have the historic form, and then you have some older additions, and now you're going to have newer additions. So the intent of the guidelines is to break all that apart. So you can see the evolution of the building from the original conditions to the 70s conditions to the 90s conditions to 2022. And in this case, by filling that in, as shown on the page, it does not provide that intentional differentiating method. So in filling that section would not meet the intent of the guidelines. The State Historic Preservation Office also commented on that, and they asked that the applicant limit that extension over that proposed rebuilt side porch area, because that would help to provide a differentiating between the updated and new elements from the existing conditions of the building and not overwhelm the footprint of the historic building. So that's it for the Winstead House. Okay, now we're moving on to the Carriage House. Is everyone familiar with where the Carriage House is, or do you want me to pull up the site plan and show you?
Why don't you show it just for people that might be watching?
Sure. Okay, so the site plan is here. We were just talking about the Winstead House, which is this building here. The Carriage House is located here. It is a non-historic building located more interior to the site. The proposal requests approval to reclad the non-historic Carriage House, alter the roof line through the implementation of gables, and modify that glass roof area right here. Very telltale 70s area located here, to be more meaningful by being a shed addition. You can see here. As a non-historic building, the guidelines generally support the proposed alterations, as the roofline material and fenestration changes are designed to be in keeping with the original building, meaning the historic Winstead building. And the changes improve the overall structure's appropriateness within the historic district as supported by the guidelines. At the DRC's recommendation, the applicant did simplify this overall design by removing some previously proposed conjectural elements such as a cupola. So it does not feel it's not feigning a historic use on the site. It simply is just going to be a building that is modified to be more in keeping with the character of the historic elements of the site. Okay, moving on to the relocated buildings. So there is also a request to relocate a building to the site that is not there currently. That building is where my cursor is shown here at the front of the property. And it has been something that's been discussed a long time by the city with the applicant. So the proposal is to relocate a Rosenwald school from Spring Hill that is threatened by demolition by neglect and imminent development to this site to preserve and maintain. So without getting into a lot of the history of the site, which I believe most people have heard, the guidelines state that one may relocate a historic building into the district if the building is appropriate to the surrounding styles, heights, scales, materials, and lot placement, and does not result in loss of a historic building on the site to which it's being moved. So this is proposed to be placed in an area where there is currently no building, so there is no consequence to adding the building to the site from that perspective. The schoolhouse is contemporary in age to some of the surrounding buildings in those two districts that meet, possesses a high level of historical integrity. The relocation will not result in the loss of a historic building, but rather will save this important piece of local and endangered African American history and afford the community the opportunity to learn more about the historic significance of the building, which is associated with the Julius Rosenwald School program. It does not appear that the building location will interrupt view sheds associated with the site. And overall, the schoolhouse is proposed to be situated in a way that's respectful of the site and setting of the Winstead House and the other historic house on the property, this Hainesbury House located here. So the final portion of the application is the smokehouse. So with some additional review, the applicant has provided evidence that the building was never a smokehouse. That's kind of like the colloquial term that everyone's given to it, but it is indeed a historic outbuilding that's on the site. So I'm going to go to that page. Yeah. Here we are. The applicant didn't provide a photograph. Is everyone familiar with it? I can pull up a photograph if needed.
Why don't you do that?
Okay, give me just a moment.
Thank you.
I'm close. Well, the last application didn't have a photograph either. I think because
That's
we've looked at this
okay.
so often that
That's
everyone's
okay.
familiar with it. So I will show you the aerial. Or at least the site plan. Okay, so the site plan indicates that the smokehouse is currently, I think it's existing, there's existing conditions. It's currently generally in this area. It's a very small one-story structure that was questionably on the site at different times in history, and I think that's what the applicant has provided some additional information about, and we've had lots of discussion about over the last year. So the house is here currently, which is behind the building entirely, and it's generally in vicinity of that mansard roof area that's proposed to be reskinned. The applicant is proposing to relocate it so it's behind that loggia addition, behind the 1990 portion that was added to the side of the front facade here. There has been analysis of historical documentation. The city of Franklin has been blessed to have access to a number of what we call Sanborn fire insurance maps, which are historic maps that were conducted in order to help people insure their assets at the time. And they've been proven to be really nice historical documents to be able to see how buildings grow and change and relocate over time. The maps that you see on the screen, 1898, 1913, show the site at those different years. And then the applicants also provided a property survey that was, I believe, conducted in 1973. And it's the applicant's contention that the building was not located there in 1973. I'll let the applicant speak more to that, but what we're seeing on the site, or the Sanborn maps, is that there may have been a building, whether it's this building or another building, at that location at the time, but it doesn't appear that it matches the footprint to a great degree. These aren't proven to be 100% accurate, but in my work with them over time, and I'm sure that there's commissioners that can speak to this more with more experience than I can, that they're fairly accurate in giving the general context of our property. It doesn't appear on the maps that this is necessarily the same building that was in that location. And the reason I bring that forward is because the design guidelines would recommend against the relocation of outbuildings from their historic locations. It's just not very clear that this is exactly the historic location. The commission may choose to heed on the side of caution and recommend against its relocation because it's not clear. But it is, in staff's opinion, suggestive that the smokehouse may not have been originally located there in that site. And so because of that, the relocation is supported because the outbuilding location is proposed in the green area, is still behind the principal structure in a highly visible location still. Previously, it was proposed to be a more of a secondary and less visible location, which was not supported by staff, but I think in this location would still be very much evident to anyone who visits the site. So the new location is appropriate in light of those considerations. So that covers staff's analysis.
Okay. So,
Well done.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be the last time I give it, right?
Mr.
so
Vice Chair, can we have a break
we
before we
can.
start all this voting?
Well, we're going to have, yes, we can have a break, but we'll let the applicant finish their presentation on the rest of it, and we'll have citizen comments. So for all those reasons, I think a break is appropriate. We've been over 2 hours, so we'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay, so for those watching at home, the commission discussion will reconvene at 7:20.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, send pictures.
And she talks about how to do digital.
Kim said she took like 1,000.
Of what? It's the largest contiguous National Register district in America. And it was one of the first five Main Street.
Yeah, but I stayed there about 3 months ago.
It's pretty, isn't it?
Yeah.
Warehouse, brick warehouse is turned into a hotel.
That's where I'm saying.
It's cool. Really cool. Owned by Marriott.
Yes, yes, Marriott. I'm taking. Are we ready? No?
Yeah.
I guess not quite yet.
There's a real pretty state park there.
Yes, we're gonna go high.
Some of the pressure off because they're just.
Are we all in our places?
Okay, everybody, at 7:20, we need to start filming again.
Yes.
No kidding.
Mr. Denton's recused, right?
I'm
Right.
sorry?
Mr. Denton's recused.
Cues,
Okay.
right.
Yes.
And we're starting with the applicant's
Yes.
presentation.
Joey, we're ready. Oh, he's already started. Okay, everyone got to see me do my thumbs up. Okay, cool.
Okay. And
So Mary, for everyone at home, can you
Yes.
just say what we're doing now?
Yes, we have reconvened the October Historic Zoning Commission meeting, and the staff has made their presentation, and now the applicant is making the presentation on behalf of the project. So if you would
Thank you. Hi,
state
and,
your
again, my
name
name is
again.
Greg Gamble, representing the applicant, the Heritage Foundation, and I don't have anything additional to add regarding a presentation. Amanda covered everything very thoroughly. I will say that the recommendations as far as conditions of approval by staff, which is 4 through 8, we agree with. No problems. Thank you so much.
Okay.
We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. And is there anyone else that wants to speak on behalf of the applicant, Greg? Is that it? Okay. So now we're ready for comments from the public. We'll start the public comment period, and I think I am saying them in the way I received them, but maybe not. The first spokesman is Lillian Stewart at 201 Lewisburg Avenue.
Good evening, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. I commend the Heritage Foundation for their acquisition of the Franklin Grove Estate. Of course, it is part of the Lewisburg Avenue Historic District, one of the first in a group of others years ago. And of course, it has a residential component in the area. I have two concerns, and one was the lighting. And do I understand there will be no, that the commission does not recommend, staff does not recommend pole lights?
You go ahead.
Did I understand that?
Yes, the recommendation to the commission is based on context. So the commission would need to make a determination of the appropriate context. Staff's opinion that this is a residential context is this historically it was. The Secretary of Interior standards recommend standard number 1, that the site be used as it was historically or altered in a way or adaptively reused in a way that offers minimal impact to the site and setting and the historic resources on the site. So with that, it would be recommended that the commission make a determination of context, but staff's recommendation would be that this is still a residential context being adaptively reused.
And the way I understand it, just so the commission can be clear, you are recommending in your motion that we not do pole lights, but that will go to it's got to go to codes. We've got to make sure it complies.
So-
And so that may be revisited.
That's a great question. It would be recommended that the commission make a determination of appropriateness based on the guidelines, regardless of what other regulations are in place.
Okay.
If it's determined that other regulations would require some amount of pole lighting, we will bring that back to you
To you, that's what I
and share
understood.
that with you with some options.
Right. Okay.
Because there are some, I understand, that can be reduced, even if they're elevated, that the illumination can be reduced in such a way that it is not, does not change the character of the neighborhood. Thank you. First of all, also, I'm concerned about the use of wood fences. I feel that brick walls would be, or masonry walls would be much more effective as a sound buffer for neighbors close by, and also for the historic appearance. I don't feel that the wood or board fencing is in character with such an historic site as the Winstead House and to the original Franklin Grove estate. I'm glad to see that name return to it because that is a fascinating era in Franklin's history relating to the Civil War and earlier. So I would hope that with the standards that the Heritage Foundation is now advocating and supporting, that they would use masonry walls instead of repairing or replacing stone fences. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being brief. Our next is Annie Daniel. At 311 Berry Circle. I'll just say that for you.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you for your commitment in being here because your decisions have brought us to this place tonight where we hope there will be just workable details. It's been a long road, and your work has saved, in our opinion, Franklin in so many ways, so thank you. Tonight I'm here requesting that when you review the heritage plans, that you consider the value of preserving a desirable living environment for us, the adjoining neighborhood. This is crucial in attracting future families to actually live their lives on such streets as 3rd, 4th, and 5th, Main and Fair, the downtown historic area. This lifestyle is Franklin's ticket to its award-winning charm. Please consider a way to retain our private serenity as the public intrudes into our lives. This month, Eastlick and I visited Charleston. Eastlick's my husband. It's lovely, historic, private homes and neighborhoods are also their first-class ticket. Their retail, tourism, entertaining, business communities respect this fact and have learned to coexist and enhance each other by creating walls and barriers that respect space, privacy, and different lifestyles, and we feel that is crucial. The Heritage, after the city's urging, has asked us, their neighbors, for our input, and we responded unanimously. We desire an effective, sustaining, dense, unporous, light and sound barrier on the property line that will protect our way of life from noise, lighting that's created by the cars, trucks, buses, and pavement that is the necessary yet unattractive offshoot of most public endeavors. So we ask for only low mode lighting with strict rules of operation and time and the longevity. We tonight do not believe that you can discuss lighting and sound without considering their relationship to the surrounding environment and the buffers. Lately, comparisons have been made of this property to the Carter House, which is, as you know, 10 acres with only one structure and no outside lighting, no pole lighting. There are no residential homes bordering the Carter House, so we don't feel that that is a viable relationship. So now we understand that the Heritage really does not consider and have not considered and don't plan to consider a wall other than the existing unstable rotten wood fence that they plan to repair. We feel that they are insisting on a short-term solution for a very long-term problem. We have been told that they don't plan to consider Ms. Stone, the Georges, or our Eastlick and my request for any further protection beyond planting the 10-foot evergreen barrier. So I'm here to say that we believe the only harmonious solution to these problems and our living in a happy union is that there be a dense, non-porous, permanent masonry boundary barrier where requested by the neighbors, and that the burden of this action is on who we all know is this well-financed, wonderful organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric George at 313 Berry Circle.
I live at 313 Berry Circle, and I don't think I can put it any better than Ms. Daniels just did. We do need a buffer between us and the Heritage, or the Grove. I commend the Heritage Foundation for their repurposing of the property. I think it's a great idea, and I'm 100% on board for it. I live at 313 Berry Circle, which would be right underneath one of the proposed pole lights and right next to the secret garden, which I find doesn't mingle very well. So to speak on the people or the neighbors on Berry Circle, I echo Ms. Daniels' comments about we need a buffer zone, we need our privacy, we need to protect our neighborhood and our sanctuary where we come home to at night and not have to worry about headlights coming through the proposed vegetation barrier, which I don't think will be enough to stop the sound or the lights. It may be a great idea and it may sound great, but I don't think it's going to be substantial enough to protect our privacy and to keep the headlights out of our windows and to keep the sounds of the horns and the cars and the people mingling and having a good time from penetrating our household and our porches and our gardens and our own private space. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Walter Green at 227 4th Avenue South.
I'm a neighbor, but not a perimeter neighbor like the three folks who, well, two of the three folks who just spoke before me. I concur with everything they said, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the concerned neighbors of Franklin Grove, which is a much larger group than just the perimeter neighbors. That's still an active group, and we're going to continue to be active. Two topics tonight, reiterating what the previous speakers have said. The pole lights, if I were a perimeter neighbor, I would not want that light pollution associated with those lights. I hope that the city, whatever group, in whatever way, can give full consideration to protecting these neighbors from lighting. The second, of course, is fences and walls. The neighbors on the perimeter want the city and the planning commission to know that they need better protection from noise and light associated with the vehicles than what is currently proposed. The neighbors were pre-existing to the purchase of that property by the Heritage Foundation, and it seems that the foundation should act to protect them from the changes that the foundation is making to the site. The neighbors look forward to having communications with the Heritage Foundation in the future and would hope that those would be in a group setting with multiple neighbors as opposed to individually. Thank you for your service to the city and for listening to us. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank you. Okay, now, it's the board's time, and I guess we're taking this as one action, but you're welcome to go down the list for your comments, or if you would like to get a motion on the table.
So I believe
think
Ms. Besser had recommended that we have multiple motions based on the headings under the staff analysis portion of the
Have multiple
document.
motions now based on, okay.
Is
that's
that
good.
amenable to everyone on the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I think it will take a little more time, but I think it'll be more clear in the long run.
Yeah.
So it'll be helpful. So just to reiterate, parking, walkways and driveways is the first motion.
Right. So, do I have a motion to approve the parking, the alterations to the site setting, which is parking, landscaping, lighting, walkways, driveways, walls, fences, and grading?
Ms. Pierce, if I may, if you go to the second page of the staff report,
Okay.
under staff analysis, there's multiple bold headings, and I believe it may be easier if we have a motion for each one of those headings.
Okay.
So you see where it says parking, walkways, and
I'm trying
driveways?
to find it. Just a moment. I think I went over too far. Yes, I went too far. I can find it. Okay, we'll do the parking, walkways, and driveways at this point. Do I have a motion to approve or disapprove?
I'd like to make a motion to approve a certificate of appropriateness for the parking, walkways, and driveways as presented and with the recommendations from staff.
Okay,
Second that.
and there's a second by Tyler. Is there any discussion?
I have a comment. So one of the things that I was trying to figure out is the Heritage Foundation wants to put a ramp outside of the, like the later edition, the one that Mrs. O'Moore built. And I could not figure out how that ramp was going to get to the parking lot. It seemed to me that that was problematic.
Yes, staff covered that in the grading alterations section. So we may want, and I know this is very complicated, and thank you for bearing with me. If you prefer to take each action one by one, we certainly can do that. I think Ms. Besser's point is she wants to make sure she comments on what she wants to comment on at the appropriate time, correct?
Well, I think
And it not get forgotten.
Yeah, exactly. And like I have this note here, and that do they connect? And so that's what I'm trying to find out. And I don't know if we can answer that to make me feel comfortable and other people feel comfortable, I'd be fine with that. But it just seemed that where the ramp goes in and where the parking was, I couldn't see how someone could get from that parking spot to the ramp.
I think that ramp
They don't
allows
even connect.
access to the front garden, not to the parking lot.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, all
Absolutely.
right.
Thank you.
Then that answers my
I
question.
had the same question. I was like, what is this for? Because the entrance is in the back.
Right.
and
Right.
There's no
Okay.
ramp needed.
Okay.
Well, not one that shows here, but I think it's just to get
Okay.
people wheelchair bound into the front garden.
Okay. then
That's
I'm fine with
that was a great question. And as far as the ramp, I'd recommend that you make any comments about the ramp under the following motion,
Right,
the next
sure.
one.
Okay. So now, that will be your comment
That
on
would be my comment.
the next.
Do we need any, just because we don't have a staff formulated motion, which are usually better than ours, do we need any language in the specifics, in that specific motion that relates to planning, zoning? What's Franklin's, do they have Public Works?
I think that's a great question too. So under recommendation, it was meant to cover the whole project. So to your point, you're wanting to make sure that none of the recommended conditions, if you want to employ them, get left out.
Can you give your recommendations on each one of
I can do
these as
that.
we go?
Okay, and bear with me
Okay.
because I'm having to
Okay.
get them
On
on
the
the fly
fly,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the recommendation for the parking, walkways, and driveways. In light of the comments presented, it is recommended that the commission approve those actions as outlined in the staff report with the conditions with conditions numbers 7 and 8 on the report.
Okay.
Which would be that the application meets all the requirements of the City of Franklin prior to issuance of a building permit, including site plan approval, and that any additional changes to the approved plans must be returned to either staff or the commission for review and approval.
Okay, so we need a motion to amend that original motion, with those two items,
And then, well, yes.
and work our way
Okay,
back down.
Down. Does someone want to make
Madam Chair.
an
I move
amendment?
To amend the motion to add conditions 7 and 8.
Okay,
Second that.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. So now we're back to talking about the main motion with the one amendment. And my question, does that include, where does that leave the lighting?
The lighting is it's going to be its own motion.
On motion, okay. Okay. So is everyone ready to vote on this part? Okay. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Okay, so we are now moving to,
Page 3 of the report, grading alterations. And just as a reminder, the grading alterations are really the way that the land is being manipulated on the site. That would include the comments about the landing and proposed in front of the Winstead House, which I know the applicant has already stated that they're willing to remove, but you need to make a motion on that. The area where the ramp's proposed in front of that 1990s hyphen area at the front of the property. And then I believe that's the two main grading areas. There are some grading changes proposed as part of the relocation of the retaining walls at the roadway. I've covered that there.
so your staff comments cover what they said they were also willing to change.
Yes, the
Yes.
staff's recommendation would be approval with comments number 1 and 2 and 7 and 8. Number 1 would be that the proposed grading in front of the Winstead House be removed from the design. and that those revised plans come back to staff, or if the commission prefer, they come back to the commission. That's certainly something that you can add to your motion. Number 2, that in accordance with the guidelines, the proposed ramp at the hyphen area be either removed from the proposal or the applicant submit additional information to substantiate review by the commission in light of the guidelines. It's simply just not sufficient enough to review at this time. Specifically, the information about how the grade is proposed to be situated at this location and how that ramp will look is missing from the plan.
Okay.
And then 7 and 8 are the standard, must meet all the requirements of the city prior to implementation, and any changes would come back to you
Okay.
or to staff.
Okay, do we have a motion on that portion, which is the grading at the front
Grading alterations.
and the fencing that was going to go
I
around
think
it
the
and
fence
the
and
ramp?
walls is a different motion.
Oh,
Yeah,
for
she's
that
referring
part,
to the-
okay.
This is just grading alterations.
Just grading, okay. Do we have a
But
motion?
that would include the little iron fence that was on
Fence,
top.
yeah.
wouldn't it?
Yes,
Yes. Because it's part of the porch.
And what we're voting on currently doesn't include the ramp.
it does.
It does.
So my question on that, if I understood the applicant correctly, both the ramp and perimeter fencing are to come back to us at a later date.
Yes.
So right now, the application includes a ramp, but it's
So you-
insufficient to review. You need to,
Right.
you need to make an action on that. Whether your action is it's insufficient to review, that part needs to be deferred, or you need to remove it from the plan, and if you
Right.
want to put it back, then come back to the commission.
Right.
Which
Okay.
is what
So-
condition 2 says.
So
Yes,
who would-
exactly.
That's what 2 says, yeah.
Uh-huh.
2 says exactly what your
Yeah.
action is.
So who wants to make the motion?
So,
I promise those very thoughtful.
Yeah,
Ma-
it's right
ma-
here.
Madam Chair, I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the grading alterations with the conditions listed 1, 2, 7, and 8.
Okay. And, okay. And is there a second?
I'll second. And just for clarification, that would mean that the recommendations as explicitly expressed by staff would be those that are applied by the applicant, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And if the applicant wanted to do anything any differently, it would come back to this commission.
Okay.
Okay.
So that, that eliminates the front grading around the front porch and the ramp for now. We're not saying we're against the ramp, we're saying we have not
Insufficient
enough
information.
information.
That's
And
it.
then the rest of the grading, we're saying we are okay with.
Does
And
it
eliminates
eliminate
the
the
iron
3-foot
fence.
iron fence?
It eliminates the iron
Well, the iron
fence.
fence wouldn't be there if the grading
Right.
is not
Grading's
there.
not
Yes, it does.
But there's a whole section for fences and walls, which we'll get to.
That's a different,
That's
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, we gotta
So-
we gotta get the dirt in the right place before
Right.
we build the
Yeah.
walls.
So this
So-
effectively
Iron
would
fence could be
remove that 3-foot tall
It
retaining wall in front of the porch
theoretically could
and that,
be that we're
and
removing.
the railing in front, on top of it, because there would be no retaining wall.
Yeah. So we've got a motion, a second. We've had discussion. Is there any more discussion on this portion?
Well, only to Ms. Besser's point, I was going to propose that we defer the ramp
Well, you can
discussion.
defer it, or you
I-
cannot approve it,
yeah.
and they will bring something in more detail.
Yeah, I just didn't want it to be lumped into whatever
Okay.
motion we just made.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's
in
Condition
a
number 2.
deferral of, essentially a deferral anyways, because we're saying not enough information.
Information,
So it's
yeah.
not approved, just
True.
Yeah,
bring it back.
Exactly.
Okay.
That way we don't defer it to a specific meeting. They
Exactly.
can defer it to
Right.
when they're ready.
That's
Yeah.
exactly why I wrote it that way.
Yeah.
It's because there are a number of different steps in this process, and I'm not sure when they'd be ready to bring that forward.
Right.
So
they're required to do it, but.
we've got a motion, a second. We've had discussion. Is there any more discussion before we vote? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So now, where are we moving to, Amanda? We're moving,
Okay, page 4 of the reports is lighting.
lighting.
And as a reminder, the staff recommendation is that the lighting plan meets the intent of the guidelines with the exception of the pole light fixtures as shown, as they are not supported in residential context. So it would be, up to the commission to decide whether or not staff's interpretation of context is the one that you agree or disagree with, but it is recommended that if pole lights end up to be required by the city in some capacity, they will come back to this commission at a different point if they're denied this evening.
And any conditions that apply to that?
So the recommendation
Course
would be
7 and
to
8.
approve with the condition
3?
number 3, and then 7 and 8.
Okay.
Amanda, do
Yes.
you know, did you count how many lights are going to be on the site?
I did not count the number.
That
I did count the pole lights, there are 24.
24, and then how, do we know, does the applicant know how many ground lights were?
They want to know if you know how many lights fixtures are going to be.
Not off the top of my head. We still have to go through the site plan process, and the City of Franklin code requires that we have a certain light candles for the parking lot, so that's evaluated during that site
Right.
plan review process. So what we're showing you are the typical lights that we would be using for the overall campus. The pole lights are included in that in order to meet the candlelight requirements for a parking lot in the City of Franklin regulations. But we're ready to go to that next level where we start plugging in all of the engineering that goes into the site plan documents, so. But we're open to your recommendation. We want to keep a low-profile lighting on the campus.
I will just say this, we've had someone who was a commissioner until recently, made us very aware of light pollution, and we haven't done a lot of uplighting because of that. So I'll just make that comment.
Should we separate the pole lighting from the other lighting on the property?
So the condition that staff is recommending is listed as number 3, which is that the pole lights are not recommended for use, but the remainder of them are, based on what you see on the screen and the locations, appear to meet the intent of the guidelines. And again, it's important that the commission share through a motion its formal opinion with staff so that staff can relay that to other bodies that review this, in this case, the Planning Commission.
Well,
And so if it's found that additional lights beyond what those are shown or conditioned for approval or not approved in your motion are needed, those will come back to you for reconsideration in light of all the information you need to know in order to
Well,
make that decision.
what I was suggesting is that if we don't know what's going to be required, and if pole lights are required, that this, to me, is an overall lighting plan.
It would be
and
perfectly fine to defer if that's the recommendation of the
That's-
commission.
Would be my question.
I would like to bring up, though, the term candle lights has been brought up and not pole lights. And I have a feeling that the zoning ordinance applies to candle lights for parking lots. We need to explore if there are other ways to get that.
Yes.
And I think if this goes to the Planning Commission and we haven't taken an action in some way and just deferred it, they need to hear what our opinion is about the
Okay.
pole lights.
I think we should have a motion just to start
Yeah.
discussion.
I'd
Okay,
like to make a
does
motion.
anyone want to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to deny a certificate of appropriateness for the lighting as presented.
Okay,
Second that.
and there's a second. Is there any discussion? Greg, is it appropriate for the applicant to comment again?
My comment would be all lighting as proposed.
That was my intent.
And
And
that-
I will give a reason after we.
Do you want to give your?
Yes,
Okay.
Was there a second?
Yes,
Was there a
Yeah, there was
second?
a
Yes.
second.
I
So
seconded.
the reason is that we just don't have enough information. The question was presented about how many lamps of one kind or another are proposed. We don't know the exact number, we don't know the exact location. The pole lights, as you've heard, are controversial, and we don't have enough information on those either. We need examples, we need context, and that's just not, to my satisfaction, been presented.
Right, and that too is why I believe we should deny it at this point, is because, you know, with what you have here, it would be easy to put together a photometric plan, and you can tell the neighbor exactly how many foot candles will be in their backyard. If all the fixtures are really selected and placed where they are, and you have picked all the options,
Exactly.
we should be able to tell every single neighbor exactly how many foot candles from the property line till it hits their back porch or whatever they're concerned with. And this doesn't do that. I think it's a good idea. I would venture to say, or I guess my opinion is, I would be in favor of a recommendation to planning and zoning, and I'd love to hear what you all say, for a reduction in the foot candle requirements that is appropriate. I don't know what that is.
We don't even know, right?
But if it would,
I'll call
if after photometrics, it shows, oh, we're 10-foot candles in this guy's backyard, can we get that to 2? And is that still a level of safety that we would be, I would be okay with a little give and take, because I'm concerned about the neighbors.
May I help frame the discussion in light of the guidelines that apply that this commission is able to interpret and enforce? So the guidelines that apply are pretty extensive. There's a pretty extensive lighting section on fixtures themselves, as well as illumination considerations. And so that is new as of the May adoption of the guidelines document. With that said, we don't look at candles as much, but we do look at the color of the bulb, whether it's a warm color or a cool color with warm recommended. The Planning Commission is going to look more at the candles, but that's why you're giving a recommendation today on any concerns you may have. But the use considerations are for the Planning Commission to make, not for this commission. So you are entitled to look at the count, you're entitled to look at the fixture itself, and you're entitled to look at the hue of the color, if that helps.
Yes, and we don't have any of that.
We do not have
So-
the exact count, and we do not have the, all the fixtures, unless they're all shown here, and then the hue.
Yeah, and to your point, Amanda, like, we're not supposed to probably consider the foot candles,
Right.
but if you're asking me to give you a break on something at the sacrifice of what the neighbors might want, then I'll just say, no, show me the foot candles. I mean, it's real
Am I-
simple to me.
may I address-
Council, can the applicant talk again? I'm just asking
We're
for
really kind of
process.
in the discussion point. Given how complicated this is, a back and forth is going to turn into a lot of design on the fly and negotiating meetings and all that. So I would be more comfortable if y'all would just continue discussing.
Okay.
If that makes sense? Sorry, Greg.
One comment that I'd like to add too is not as much as about foot candles as lamp selection, because that renders the color.
Yeah.
And also the beam spread, the way that the fixture, the type of fixture and the type of lamp can render how it would affect the site, how it would affect the perimeter neighbors. Whatever direction, are we going up, down, foot level lighting, the pole thing. A lot of things can be accomplished by specific
I'll talk to you
fixture
later.
selection.
And that's
So we
why,
need to know those things.
when we first he brought up about foot candles, that, if it's required by zoning, then it can be accomplished in other ways other than pole lights.
Correct.
And that was the only comment with that, and I think it would be positive if we sent that message to the Planning Commission that we do not recommend pole lights on this residential, what we consider residential site. Which
Yes, the
brings,
commission reviews fixtures, appropriateness of fixtures to context. That is the role of the commission right now.
and I was wondering, just as an off comment on this, so is this still zoned civic institutional, or is it being sought to rezone the property?
There is no rezoning requested.
So it's civic institutional?
Yes, sir.
And, yeah, what I'd say, if everybody wants to look on page 49 too, there's two pictures of pole lights that sit there today. Different than what they're proposing, but there's already pole lights on the property.
What page talking about?
Page 49,
There's one here in the photo.
yeah. So there's pole lights on the property, but they're not the variety that has what we call the snakehead or gooseneck or what, there's a picture of what they're proposing here.
So there seems to be some confusion from the applicant that I just want to bring up so I can make sure it's very clear to everyone what the role of the commission is at this time. So there has to be a lighting plan approved by the planning commission in light of the zoning ordinance. If you would be comfortable doing so, the commission can review the lighting plan after the planning commission reviews the plan. If the planning commission approves the plan, then you can review the light fixtures at that point for placement, fixture design, and the color of the bulb. And if they're uplights or downlights, like anything in the design guidelines document that's listed, and those are the main things. That would allow the applicant to continue to move forward, but to Mr. Laster's point, any sort of information you want to relay to the planning commission as it reviews this plan should be included in a motion.
Well, I would like to amend the motion that the Historic Zoning Commission recommend to the Planning Commission the minimal amount of pole lighting necessary. I'd like to say eliminate all of it, but as Commissioner LaMarinelle points out, there are a few on site currently, but I doubt there are 24.
Would your motion include the plan coming back to the commission to review all those elements?
Yes.
So I would include that. Okay.
Yeah, and also to include the plan approved by the Planning Commission coming back to Historic Zoning Commission for approval.
So minimum amount of pole fixtures necessary to meet the requirements of the city? Or no?
Of the zoning ordinance.
Okay. And then the plans come back for review.
And that's specifically on the pole lights.
Okay.
I have a question about the number of light fixtures in general. Is that something that we are entitled to review?
I would need to consult the design guidelines to make sure I provide you the correct guidance, but I believe that certainly you wouldn't want to overwhelm a context. So if you're reviewing it in light of context and there were 30,000 lights proposed, which is not what's proposed, but of course that would overwhelm the context of the site. So in relation to that perspective, yes, but the individual design and locations are all reviewed as part of that too. So yes and no.
And Lisa, what I know very little about lighting, but some, is that one strategy for making sure things don't bleed so much is to use more of them, but they're smaller. So that's, like I said, we don't review the foot candles, but that sure tells me a lot about how far it spreads and those type of things that we are judging because of quantity and height, and those things are all things we review, which will impact that photometric plan. It'll have a grid of numbers all across the site. You'll know exactly. So I would recommend y'all do that. For planning, will probably make you do it. And then we'll get to probably see it, and it will help inform, because like I said, I'd be in favor of more fixtures,
But,
In
but
that case.
anything, this is what I'm
Ladies, is there a second to the motion to amend?
Well, that's what we're discussing, if there's a second or not.
Well, there either is or there's not a second. There's not a discussion about whether there's a second.
a second to the motion on the pole lights, right?
To amend, to include the recommendation.
Yeah.
I
To
wonder
Brian's
if I could
recommendation.
amend the amendment.
Well,
Let's-
since you made it,
No.
did you make it?
No.
Well, after the second, I think you could.
Well, then let's do this one,
Okay,
I guess, and then
Yes.
you can offer an amendment to the amendment.
okay.
Okay, so all those, the way I understand the motion is to recommend to the planning commission that there be no pole lights. Is that,
Here's,
think the
if I,
minimum
if I could help, maybe.
yes, help us.
So, okay. So here's where you are. You have a motion to deny the COA as presented and a second. That is the main motion on the floor. An amendment was offered to add to that a recommendation that the Historic Zoning Commission to the Planning Commission recommends the minimal amount of pole lighting necessary with a plan to come back to the Historic Zoning Commission with those elements after they've been looked at. There is no second to that amendment.
Okay,
That is where you are.
okay. Is there a second
Does that
to
make
that
sense?
amendment?
I would second that.
Okay. Now, all
Well,
in favor of the amendment, then we're going to amend the amendment if you want to. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, now,
I need a count.
I think.
I didn't hear it
did
from everyone.
I think
Six
there
of
was supposed
us.
to be discussion after the second, correct?
There can be, yes.
Okay.
There can be, okay.
So the discussion that I was going to bring, so if you look on page 40 of the packet, and you will see what's known as a path light. And the only reason I bring this up, if you go to the largest amount of national registered buildings in the nation, which is at Mount Pleasant, Shakertown, Mount Pleasant, Kentucky, that they utilize a path light to illuminate much of their property. And they do have a few pole lights, but the lighting is soft, and it is not very bright, but enough to see your way around. I'm just saying, something like this could be implemented on this property as well.
Which we would have a chance to review
Yeah.
after it's been submitted to the city, correct?
I'm assuming.
If,
Yeah.
if I may, what I'm hearing is that there's concerns about understanding what regulations are required by the other city bodies and the other documents that,
We don't
that
think
apply.
we've been given that information.
That's what I'm saying, that there's concern because you don't know what that is fully, and you don't feel you can make a decision without that information.
And it appears that, to me, that the commission is trying to say that they would like to have as soft a lighting on this site as possible and meet what they have to meet in the way of city standards. That's what I'm basically hearing.
So as I understand currently, all the motions denied all the lighting, and then say to the planning commission, our recommendation is minimal on pole lights.
That's what I have on the record as you making a motion, an amendment to state.
And
And then,
can I make a motion as chair?
You can, but right now you have a motion
Motion set,
to amend
okay.
and a second on the floor. It
You're
needs
right,
a vote.
okay. So,
After you discuss, I mean, you're welcome to
okay,
discuss.
if
and
I,
then the only other amendment I was going to make is that, based on what you were saying, Tyler, I think there's wisdom in adding to that, we request a photometric plan, is that what you called
Which I
it?
think they'll
They have to
require
do for
anyway,
this.
so we'll get
They
that.
will require, okay, so that doesn't need to be
And that's my concern
articulated.
with the amendment as a whole, is all these things we're maybe asking for are
So the
already
photometric
gonna
plan will
happen.
be required by the city of Franklin as part of the site plan review. So if you do not approve any fixtures at this time, even though the city will require the fixtures, you're entitled to review them as well. So if the city approves the site plan and the photometric plan, you can ask for that information when you review all the fixtures at a later date. You'll have that photometric plan.
and at that time, what I think everybody is getting at, and I think the applicant too, is to have a soft, as minimal lighting as we can, and not having pole lights does not say that.
I understand
So
that.
I was going to, if it's appropriate for me to make another amendment, that just in general, that the lighting be as soft as possible, because it may turn out that pole lights help make it softer in some parts of it. I don't think we
And that's-
know that.
And that's why I think I will probably respectfully vote against the amendment, because I think the denial just brings it back later. We get to see all that. We can do a separate motion to make whatever recommendation notes we
Okay.
want. But denying this as it sits today,
Okay.
but we have to first vote on the amendment.
Okay.
So have
I'll-
we voted on the amendment?
No,
yet?
we have not.
I thought,
Please
okay,
vote on the
all those
amendment.
in favor of the
All right.
amendment
All right,
to,
so why don't I remove the amendment, my part, and then we will go strictly with denial.
Okay, you can remove your amendment so long as the second does not dispute that.
Which is Ms. Worthington.
yes,
I would second removal.
okay.
Then it can be, your motion can be withdrawn. The original
Okay.
motion is now deny as presented just across the board.
And the
Okay.
importance of discussion.
Okay, so
Touche.
so we have a second on that motion?
Yes.
The
Okay,
original motion.
so all those in favor, is there any discussion about the denial, I suppose?
I will make sure personally that it is very clear to planning staff and the planning commission that the Historic Zoning Commission feels strongly about limiting the brightness on the site and recommending the lowest amount of lighting possible in order to meet the regulations that apply.
Okay, and then our motion that has been made and seconded is to deny the lighting plan.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it.
Thank you. Okay, next, fences and walls. So.
Fences and walls.
I need to make a statement, if I may. Okay, so on fences and walls, there were a number of comments related to fences and walls, and again, I want to make sure it's very clear what the role of the commission is at this time.
Okay,
So I'm going to find the fences and walls section really quick. Okay, you can see it on the screen here. The applicant is requesting either relocation of in a slightly different location due to the roadway, or the implementation of new fences or walls in all the locations shown in color on the screen. There have been some comments about perimeter fencing, and I believe that intent is mainly that as it relates to the residential properties that are adjacent to this, in this area. So I do want to note that the applicant's not requesting any sort of action on those. The fences and walls that exist are the ones that exist, and their action would be to preserve and maintain those. Some of those are not their fences and walls. Some of those belong to neighbors, and the applicant cannot request action on those. But it's important to note the role of the commission is to review alterations to existing fences and walls, whether they're historic or not, to ensure that you maintain the historic materials and character, or that any alterations to non-historic are in keeping with the character of the district, and that the commission review any request for new in light of the design for character, the height for character, and the placement for character. So because the applicant's not requesting any of these, it really would not be within the purview of the commission to, and I'm not saying that you are, but to condition any fences or walls that are not being requested on the plan. And part of that is if those fences or walls that are not shown on the plan are perceived to be appropriate in light of a use or use conflict, that is something that I would recommend the citizens bring forward to the planning commission, because the planning commission may be able to make those considerations and may be able to make conditions based on those considerations. But this commission is not charged to do that. So I hope that helps
Okay.
clarify the role for everyone in the room. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah, one question. So page 24,
Okay.
that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
And it includes no perimeter fencing.
It does not include any perimeter
Okay.
fencing unless where you see that dotted line where it happens to be on the perimeter of the site, but not necessarily adjacent to, well, it might be adjacent to some properties. Yes, that decorative iron fence is a type of perimeter fence, but it only where the colors are is what's being requested and is actionable this evening.
Because the document does say wood fence, repair existing wood fence, heights vary.
Yes, that is not something that's actionable right now because that's in-kind repair and would not require commission approval.
And, excuse me, but I think what we've had said by staff is that if the neighborhood has an issue on it being a noise or issue for them or light pollution, that the proper place to discuss the fence is at the planning commission.
Yes, ma'am.
And not here.
Yes, ma'am.
But if the planning commission said, yes, you need to build a fence, then we would have the right to review that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So,
Exactly.
so we're just talking about all the other fencing modifications
Yeah.
and additions. So is there a motion?
Ms. Rose, is there a staff recommendation related to this?
Yes, thank you.
So under, I don't know what page of the report it is right now, 1, 2, 3, 4. Starting on the bottom of page 4 of the report, it lists all the fences and walls shown in color, and that coordinate to the page that you see on the screen. It would be recommended that the commission approve the colored areas proposed for alteration or construction on the screen with the exception of the green area in front of the Winstead House, the dotted purple area in front of the Winstead House.
Which is the iron fence that we voted on earlier.
Yes, sir. And so that would be approval with conditions that have already been discussed. And so if you want to make it very, very clear in your motion, it would disregard the green and dotted purple areas immediately in front of the Winstead House.
And which condition numbers were those? 7, 8, and any other ones?
I believe I included it as number 2. I'm sorry, number 1. Because the wall wouldn't exist because the retaining area would no longer exist. So you can include
7,
1, 7, and 8.
8. Okay.
Yeah, do we have a motion on consideration of approval or disapproval for item 1? And staff has recommended that 7 and 8 be added to that.
Madam Chair, I move to issue a certificate of appropriateness for fences and walls as outlined with the colors on page 24 of the application documents, with the exception of the green and dotted purple lines around the front porch of the Winstead House, and with conditions of approvals number 1, 7, and 8.
I'll second that,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Could I ask a question of Mr. Gamble? What's happening here at the corner where literally at the corner, South Margin and Lewisburg, there's this turn in of the blue and this kind of odd crook at the actual corner there where South Margin hits Lewisburg. Just a little, yeah, right there. There's
Is that existing?
a lot happening, and it may be existing. I don't know.
Hey, Robert Whittemore. Yes, I can answer that. So what we are doing there at the corner is trying to match similar to what is existing out there. For that intersection, we have an existing rock wall seen in the dark blue there as it comes in. And then we are looking at proposing our proposed fence seen in orange and light blue and tying in that matches to similar to what is existing today.
Okay. Is that shown in any 3D image by chance? Okay.
But it will come back to staff for review, is that correct? Okay.
I'm Cyril Stewart,
Thank
38
you.
13 Woodland. For the, it's a little complicated in that corner because we have mast arms that will be installed for the intersection improvements there that the city's requiring we carve out for.
Okay,
We
okay.
also have high-tension power lines with guy wires coming down.
Okay.
So
I
the
thought there
odd-
had to be some
Yeah, so the odd
peculiarity.
configuration is because of those constraints.
Perfect.
Thank you, Cyril. So the mast arms for a signalization. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think everything, I've seen the previous versions of this. I think it's, an improvement of what we've seen, and things have been culled back a bit. Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay, so we had a motion and we had a second.
And
Any more
Just
discussion?
before we move on, I just wanted to express my personal opinion about how important it is to hear from the community and how much we appreciate it as a commission. And I just want to make crystal clear what we were discussing before, that the wood fencing, and someone said retaining our private serenity, unfortunately is not within our purview at this point related to the wood fencing.
Yes.
That's all.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've got a proper motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? If not,
The only question I had was where, did I hear from the applicant that they were willing to continue those discussions with the neighbors?
Absolutely, yes.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
okay,
Absolutely.
okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
And I too want to reiterate that, I don't want my comments to be seen as harsh in any way. I just wanted to make sure it's really clear to everyone in the room what the role is tonight so that expectations are managed. That's my role, is to help manage expectations, and that if you do have comments that relate to the perimeter walls, I would highly encourage you to attend the upcoming Planning Commission meeting. I don't know that that date's been scheduled, but if you speak with the applicant, I'm sure that they can give you a sense of when that might be, and just keep a lookout for that. You can sign up for our e-blast and get notifications in your email of when those meetings take place, if that helps you keep up with that. But those comments are important, and they should be relayed to the appropriate commission. Thanks.
Thank you. So, now, Amanda, we're to the house, is that correct?
Yes, alterations
Okay.
to the Winstead House. This motion will be specific to alterations to the Winstead House. That includes demolition of select non-historic additions as shown on page 43 of the application. The fenestration change at the hyphen to have a double entrance door. The alteration of the existing non-historic mansard roof addition to adjust its scale, its height, its roof line, and its cladding. New additions, the loggia, the I don't want to say reconstructed, but the side porch that's proposed to be built based on the evidence of that it used to be there through a historic photograph. The ramp proposed at the front of the building at the hyphen. I'm sorry, no. The ramp proposed on the left side of the building where a ramp currently exists, that would be enclosed. And then the addition at the back of the mansard roof addition where my cursor is on the screen. And then that second level footprint addition that's proposed. So the recommendation of staff is approval with the condition number 4, that the portion of the loggia on the west elevation be removed from the proposal, and that the revised plans come to staff or the commission for review and approval. Condition number 5, the proposal to add square footage at the second level to fill in the facade break is not consistent with the guidelines and must be removed from the plan, and the revised elevations must be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to the site plan approval. Number 6, about windows. All new windows at the approved new construction and altered existing areas must have historic profile and dimension and consist of either wood or a composite material with the appearance of wood, and that those specifications be approved by staff or the commission prior to issuance of a building permit. That the application number 7 meets all the conditions of the City of Franklin prior to a building permit, including site plan approval. And number 8, any changes to the plan approved would need to return to staff or the commission for reconsideration. So that is 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Do we have a motion?
I'll give a go at it. I would like to make a motion for a certificate of appropriateness for alterations to the existing buildings, the Winstead House, with staff's recommendations, particularly item 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, I have a question. This relates to the Winstead North elevation. This is page 48.
Page 48.
And it shows the extended, so we provided photographs of what was there previously, and that's going to be extended. So there is a window that's right in the corner of the building, right behind the main facade of the house. Is that an original window? It is original? So the next question is, so with the extended addition, will any current openings in the brick walls, like doors or windows, be covered or altered?
No. That's a great question.
And the only question I would have is staff comfortable with where they're going to change the, leave the hyphen? Are you comfortable with reviewing what that new construction will look like?
Are you referring to what's on the screen right now?
No.
Okay, so the grading and the ramp
I'm
was already
referring,
actioned.
no, I'm not referring to
Okay.
that. I'm referring to.
Oh, okay, the
on
loggia.
No. Well, I think it's on the side where you said that the profile of the house should show, and,
Oh, the fill-in on the second level?
yes, on the second level.
Yes, essentially it would just keep the condition that is currently in place.
Okay.
If there is any sort of alteration to that, yes, I'm happy to review that. If I
Okay.
feel that something needs to come back to
That's
the
the only
commission,
concern I
will
had.
do. Thank you.
So one more question. This would happen on page 49. So if you look at the photographs, the one on the left actually shows what appears to be a 2-story open porch. Do we know the date of that, when that was done? Is that a modern addition? Is that part of the historic structure?
70-something, I guess.
That's a great point. I do think that was designed as a sleeping porch. I am not certain of the dates. And you're right, that is proposed to be enclosed, and I did not note that.
And then if you look at the roof line on the drawing that says Winstead South elevation, you see a hip form gable where it doesn't appear to have one on the original structure.
And where is that specifically?
That would be page 49, Winstead South elevation. It's at the top left of the page. And then compare that to the rear photograph on the left.
Oh. Are you talking about this area right here?
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, there's no gable there today and Susan, remind me, you spent more time than I have there, but the sleeping porch is enclosed today, but there was added this open air stairwell
Yes.
for an egress stair, which is what you're seeing in the picture. It looks like a
Spiral.
open porch. It is today, but in behind there, if you look closely, is the enclosed sleeping porch.
And my understanding of the plan was that they're removing that open air component.
The stairwell.
Yes, and that's why you see it differently on the line drawing as, than you do from the photograph. But Mr. Stewart's here, and he can explain that.
The intent is to keep the sleeping porch, which we think was done sometime after 1900, but early in the 20th century, but to remove that metal stair and the open porch, keep the sleeping porch intact as it is, but then to remove what was built beyond that, and probably the 80s is probably when that was all done.
Can you address the roof line change?
You know, that may be an error in the drawings. There's
what
no
I-
intention to change the roof line.
Okay. And maintain that flatter roof that is original. or-
Then we need to amend that
Yes.
motion to make sure
Would
that's
you like to
not
do
part of the
that?
plan.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend the motion to remove from the plan the hipped gabled roof above the sleeping porch.
Per
Is there a
drawing
second?
Such and such.
You second it, Kathy?
I will second that.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
So now we'll vote on the main motion as amended if there is no more discussion. Is there any other
I
discussion?
was going to say, I just wanted to bring attention to the front porch on this mansard building that's being added. They seem to replicate nicely this kind of Italianate arch porch thing kind of elsewhere on the house. And that front porch on the mansard building doesn't have that detailing necessarily. It's a little more Georgian and less Italianate. So I don't know. I'm not saying it all needs to match, but if 90% of it's matching and 10's not, then it's just kind of peculiar to me. And I don't know if that's just, it is sort of a mini version of what's on the front of the house, minus some bracketing and things. I don't know if was some intent there to be different on purpose or what.
Would you like the applicant to speak to that?
Sure. Page 49.
We had that on a prior plan. That was our direction, was to make it look like the loggia and similar, to pick up some of the feel of the front porch of the Winstead. But at the DRC, it was requested that we simplify that and take
Sure.
that randomness out.
Sure.
So we will be happy to do it whichever way the commission feels is most appropriate.
Yeah, I remember that version, and it was pretty ornate.
Right.
I think even some of the cornice work and things, not that it's got to be super decorative, but the house has seriously significant cornice details, and there's a lot of it. It's tall. And so I think that, for me, on this particular building is missing some of the scaling and just some of the trim details. Even around the windows seem like they want some type of cornice over the windows and things like that. Not overly done, but something that holds some weight against what are really big plain walls. It's sort of nitpicky, but I think it would go a long way in making it feel a little more appropriate.
I tend to agree with that.
I don't know if there's a motion there or not, but
Do you want to
Think
try
you
to
need to
make
amend
a
again.
motion on that? And are you talking about,
it's this piece here.
right?
The new
that's- yeah,
entry
Yeah.
seems a little foreign. We
Mm-hmm.
asked him to do it. I remember, I may have been the one that said it. I don't
Yeah.
remember. But I think it feels foreign to the rest of it now because even on the same piece of the building, there's more arched porch pieces, so.
If you want to make a motion.
So that'd be an amendment then?
An amendment, yes, an amendment to the motion.
I'd like to note before you make that minor changes to non-historic elements of buildings at rear elevations are now administratively
Sure.
approvable. So if it is a concern, I would make that amendment, but please note that that is something that staff feels comfortable in light of the guidelines that come back for administration.
Well, I'd feel more comfortable making an amendment to work with them than try and
Okay.
describe
Yeah,
what I think they should
okay.
do, which is not, they're the
So
architects.
do you want to make that amendment?
Sure. I move to amend the main motion, or the amended motion, with a second amendment, which reads, "And work with staff on appropriate trim details for the Mansard building and appurtenances." All these other little pieces attached to it.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that.
Okay. So now we're voting on the main motion twice amended, is that correct?
You're voting on the second amendment.
Oh, second amendment. Oh, yes, okay. Everyone in favor of the second amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. So now we go back to the main motion,
Twice amended.
twice amended.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not clear about what is now Hieronymus Hall. What this, is it going to be wood siding or cementitious?
I'm not familiar with the name. Can you tell me what area?
Well, the Mansard roof building.
So the intent is that it's lap siding.
Okay, and it would be wood?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
that is the intent, correct? Or did you
Okay.
ask for cementitious? Because I don't recall. It sounds like you guys should specify the material if you want it to be, they've got wood on here.
Okay.
Okay, good,
I would prefer that.
yes.
Okay, so we're voting on the main, is there any more discussion? We're voting on the main motion twice amended. Correct? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, Amanda.
Okay, so the next one's alterations to existing buildings, carriage house, specific to a carriage house. That is on page 55 of the application, also on the screen here. It is recommended that the commission support the application as submitted with conditions 7 and 8, of course. Oh, I'm sorry, 6, 7, and 8, which will include the windows.
That's it, okay.
Madam Chair, I move that the alterations to the existing building, Carriage House, receive a certificate of appropriateness, noting items number 7 and 8 as conditions.
Thank you. Is there a second?
6, 7, and 8. 6, 7, and 8.
6, 7, and 8.
An 8, yeah. Okay, is
Second.
there a second? Okay.
Second, yes.
No. Is there any discussion?
If I could add really quick too, Mr. Gamble, feel free to correct me, but as I recall in your presentation, because this has gone on a while, I thought I might recap something. I believe I heard in there that the applicant has no objection to numbers 4 through 8 in the conditions. So to the extent that that's useful to you all, anytime it's 4 through 8, they have no objection.
Right.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm
Thank
wrong.
you.
I think they're adding them because they want to make sure that they include them in their motion. Otherwise, they're not applicable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The only comment I had was, I see these canopies over the, one's an entry point, I think one's a faux entry point, and those don't show up inside elevations, so I'm just curious how far those stick out, and does that make sense? I think there's some rules about canopies like that in the guidelines.
Are you speaking at the photograph where there's?
No, the
The
line
awnings?
drawings, yeah, those
Okay,
awnings.
the awnings.
They are actually part of they don't go beyond the edge of the existing roof.
Okay.
So they would change the roof form just to give a little more interest to that where the roof
But
form is
the
not.
brackets and canopies above the doors?
Yeah, well, you're right, there is a short canopy there just in protecting the doors. We were trying to pick up a little bit more of a feel of what the historical carriage house might look like.
Do you know how deep those are?
They can be anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I imagine they are akin to canvas awnings in terms of their depth.
But they'd be.
But they would be
materials.
permanent,
Okay.
wood and,
18 inches,
Yeah.
if that works.
I can
They're
certainly,
Metal on the top.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can certainly work with the applicant on the specifications if that's something the commission wants to condition.
I just didn't want to approve something
And not understand
go
what it
out
is.
there and it's 6 feet deep. We go, oh no, what have we done?
Surprise.
Okay. Is there any other discussion from anyone? It's important, it's just taking a while, so. Anybody else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, and that motion is not amended, isn't that correct?
No, no amendment.
Yep. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
So-
The next is relocation of the Lee Buckner Rosenwald School onto the site, along with the alterations shown to the building, which are on page 54 of the proposal, also on the screen here. I do want to note that when this came forward before, there were some alterations that were not supported by staff, and every single one of those have been adjusted to meet the recommendations of staff. So it is recommended that the commission approve the proposed relocation of the Rosenwald School onto the site with conditions 6, 7, and 8.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
It is a privilege to make this motion. I'm trying to beat everyone to it. I would like to propose that we recommend a certificate of appropriateness, including for the relocation of the Lee Buckner Rosenwald School, including conditions, what was it, Amanda? 6, 7, and 8.
Okay.
Second that.
And there's a second. Okay, is there any discussion?
So this is where 6 says either wood or composite material. And I just think the Rosenwald School would need to be wood, so.
Do you want to offer that as an amendment?
As an amendment, yes. Okay, so then, do we have a second to the motion?
We do.
We do.
Okay, so then I would offer as an amendment that the Lee Buckner School have wood siding.
And I'd second that.
Okay.
Wood siding or windows?
Wood siding.
Wood.
Okay, I thought you said windows.
Yeah, condition 6 is windows.
And number 6.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I think your point's well taken that they
Yeah.
should both
Yeah.
be wood.
Yes, we would, yes.
So the,
Windows
is
and
the
wall.
amendment that is wood siding and wood windows?
Wood siding and wood windows.
Wood windows, okay. And do you, who seconded that? I can't remember.
did.
Do you agree with that?
I do.
Okay. Then is there any more discussion?
I do. I have
Yeah.
one question relating it, and this is something I don't know that I've seen before, and that's an outhouse. Is there an outhouse proposed to go in this location?
With all the historical groups that have looked at this, they felt it was only appropriate. We do have photographs of the original outhouse at this particular Lee Buckner School, and it's a small, modest outhouse, and so it's tucked behind there and behind vegetation, so it's part of the context, but not obtrusive. But it will not be an operating outhouse.
It will not be operating.
But will not be operating.
Until somebody makes it operating.
So you can see on the site plan here, this is the proposed location of the Lee Buckner Rosenwald School, and here is the little building associated with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? And you're comfortable on, where the site is for the second structure?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, okay.
And this
So-
is to vote on the amendment, correct?
Yeah, but I thought we had, okay. Let's vote on the amendment that the siding be wood and the windows be wood. And the outhouse building, do you want to add that?
I would assume it would be wood.
Okay. Okay. So we're voting. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and now we're voting on the main motion. So to relocate and restore the Rosenwald Schoolhouse with items 6, 7, and 8, is that what we're supposed to say? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
It's very exciting. Okay. All right, the next one, and I'm not talking about how we're almost done. I mean,
Yeah.
the Rosenwald School is very exciting.
Exciting, yes.
Okay, so the next is the relocation of the smokehouse. It is recommended that the commission approve as shown with conditions 6 and 7.
What are we waiting for?
I feel like I've talked too much.
What's that? Oh, do I get to make the motion? Oh, okay. I move to approve the relocation of the smokehouse. And do I need to add any of these other items, 6, 7, and 8?
It would be 7 and 8.
7 and 8.
They are not requesting to alter that building with new windows, so
Okay.
7 and 8.
So I do have a concern, and I've voiced this early on, is that the smokehouse is sitting on an aggregate concrete base. And I've been, what's that?
You need a second?
I'm sorry.
A second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
All right,
go
so it's sitting on an aggregate concrete base, and I'm just concerned that when you try to move it, that it may be problematic. And that's just my concern. And whether that's a valid concern, that is my concern.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Susan. And at the same time, I mean, the burden's on the owner to not destroy the building. So I think I would implore them to take utmost care of that artifact, whatever you want to call that thing, smokehouse,
It's an outbuilding.
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 So I have a question, and this may relate to the applicant, but on page 51, where it shows a model of the outbuilding, you see brackets in the corners. Do you know if those are currently existing?
Where's that, that might be the porch in the back.
We're not
Right here.
planning on changing anything about the smokehouse. The door will probably be replaced with a more contemporary door, more appropriate to the facility, but we're not, take out the wind air conditioner in the back of it, that kind of thing, but we're not planning on changing the architecture of it.
Are you planning on changing the foundation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And believe me, we've talked to our mover, and we've selected a good mover, and as difficult as it sounds to move that foundation has actually been deteriorating the structure more than it's been doing anything. So, but relocating that's going to be nothing compared to relocating the Rosenwald School. So, but we'll have professional people and
Thank
everybody working on it. So.
So
Brian, to
I
your
have-
question on page 49, there's another little picture on drawing 49. And it looks like if you could squint at it, you might see the edge of a bracket.
Yeah.
You say on 49?
Page 49, the center photograph.
I do believe there's some brackets on the
Kind of
building
catches a little
currently.
edge of it. so-
51, it's obvious on 51, there
Okay.
are big brackets.
So in previous meetings, you know, I have given reasons why the guidelines would not support relocating this historic building. So just for the record, I'll be voting no on it. But I will say that the spot for relocation is much improved from other proposals. But I will have to vote no on the relocation of the building.
Okay. So we do have a proper motion and a second. So all those in favor of relocating the outbuilding, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
No.
No.
Okay.
2 noes.
2 noes.
3?
No, I'm sorry, I voted for it.
Okay.
Okay, so raise your hand if you're voting no. Okay, thank you.
Does that conclude our review of this project?
It does. I was taking notes really quick. Yes, emphatically, it does. And as I mentioned previously, this item does require approval by the Planning Commission, not for alterations to the buildings, but for the overall plan that would be inclusive of the lighting and the fences and walls that were not on the plan this evening if requested to be added. So you'll be seeing components of this item again, but I appreciate your patience as we work through a rather complicated project. I'm sure that the applicant agrees with that and excited to work with them to move forward.
You do need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.